The Dream Archivist's library the night the library appeared. There are nights when the world grows especially soft, when the air itself seems to settle like a gentle blanket over the sleeping earth, and on such nights, certain hidden places choose to reveal themselves to those who wander with quiet hearts. This was such a night. The wanderer had been walking for hours, though time seemed to move differently under the particular arrangement of stars that evening. The moon hung low and full, its light the color of aged parchment, casting long shadows that did not feel dark, but rather like extensions of the gentle evening itself. The wanderer moved slowly along a path that wound through an old forest, where trees grew so tall their upper branches disappeared into the soft darkness above, and where the sound of footsteps on fallen leaves created a rhythm like breathing, like the world itself inhaling and exhaling in perfect peace. There was no destination in mind. There had been no plan, no purpose other than the simple act of walking, of moving through the quiet hours when most of the world had surrendered to sleep. The wanderer often walked this way, finding comfort in the solitude, in the way the night wrapped around like a familiar shawl, in the gentle sounds of distant owls and the whisper of wind through patient branches. But tonight felt different in a way that was difficult to name. The air held a quality of waiting, of anticipation without anxiety, as though something lovely was about to unfold in its own unhurried time. The stars seemed to pulse with a softer light than usual, and between the trees, patches of moonlight pooled on the forest floor like spilled cream, glowing with a luminescence that seemed to come from within the earth itself. The wanderer paused beside a particularly ancient oak, its trunk wide enough that 3 people could hide behind it, its bark marked with the passage of countless seasons. One hand rested gently against the rough surface, feeling the solidity of it, the patient endurance. Somewhere nearby, a stream could be heard moving over smooth stones, its sound like a lullaby, rising and falling in gentle repetition. And then, between one breath and the next, the wanderer noticed something that had not been there before. Through the trees, perhaps 50 paces ahead, there was a light. Not the harsh light of modern lamps or the flickering urgency of fire, but a warm, steady glow that seemed to breathe in harmony with the night itself. It was golden and soft, with touches of amber and honey, and it filtered through what appeared to be tall windows, their shapes barely visible through the lacework of branches and leaves. The wanderer stood very still, watching. There had been no building in this part of the forest before. The path was familiar, walked many times over many seasons, and yet there it stood, a structure that seemed both solid and dreamlike, its presence undeniable, yet somehow not quite fixed, as though it existed in a space between waking and sleeping, between the world as it was and the world as it might be imagined. Curiosity rose gently, without urgency or fear. The wanderer began walking toward the light, moving slowly, carefully, as one might approach a deer in a clearing, not wanting to disturb whatever magic had brought this place into being. The air grew warmer with each step, carrying with it a scent that was difficult to place, something like old books and honey, like dried lavender and the particular smell of rain on warm stone, like cinnamon and starlight if starlight could have a scent. As the trees gradually thinned, the building revealed itself in stages, like a secret being whispered one word at a time. It was a library. The wanderer could see that clearly now, though it was unlike any library that existed in waking hours. The structure rose 3 stories high, its walls built from stone that seemed to glow from within, as though each block had been carved from solidified moonlight. The windows were tall and arched, their glass old and slightly wavy, and through them could be seen shelf after shelf of books, their spines catching the warm lamplight, creating patterns of shadow and gold that danced slowly across the visible walls inside. The roof was covered in dark tiles that gleamed like water under starlight, and from various points along its surface, small towers and turrets reached upward, each topped with a weather vane shaped like a different constellation. There were no sharp edges anywhere. Every corner had been softened by time or design. Every surface seemed to welcome touch, to invite approach. A path led to the entrance, paved with smooth stones that glowed faintly, as though they had spent the day absorbing sunlight and were now releasing it in gentle increments. Along the path, lanterns hung at intervals, their light swaying slightly in a breeze that could not quite be felt, each one casting a small pool of amber warmth onto the ground below. The wanderer followed the path slowly, taking time to notice everything. The way moss grew in the spaces between stones, soft as velvet and deep as shadows. The small flowers that bloomed along the edges, their petals closed for the night, but their presence still felt, still offering their quiet beauty to the darkness. The sound of the door as it came into view, tall and wooden and carved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves when not looked at directly. There was no bell to ring, no knocker to announce arrival. The door stood slightly ajar, and from within came that warm light, that gentle glow that promised safety and peace, and something like coming home after a long journey through cold lands. The wanderer paused at the threshold, one hand reaching out to touch the door's surface. The wood was warm and smooth, worn by countless hands before, though when those hands might have touched it was impossible to say. Everything about this place existed outside of ordinary time, outside of the rules that governed the waking world. For a long moment, the wanderer simply stood there, breathing slowly, feeling the way the night air met the warmer air from within, creating a space between that was neither one nor the other, but something in between, something liminal and lovely and full of possibility. Then, with the gentlest pressure, the wanderer pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The door closed softly behind with barely a whisper of sound, and the journey into the Dream Archivist's library began. Entering the hall of quiet lanterns, the first thing the wanderer noticed was the warmth. It wrapped around like a gentle embrace, not the heavy heat of summer, but the perfect temperature of a room that had been waiting patiently for someone to arrive, keeping itself comfortable and ready for exactly this moment. The air was still and peaceful, carrying with it those same scents noticed from outside, but richer now, more layered. Old paper and beeswax, dried roses and something faintly like vanilla, wood polish and the particular smell of time itself, if time could leave a fragrance in the places where it moved most slowly. The entrance hall stretched before the wanderer in a way that seemed both possible and impossible. It was vast, with a ceiling that rose high into shadows touched by warm light, yet it also felt intimate, cozy, as though the space itself adjusted to the comfort of whoever stood within it. The walls were lined with dark wood panels that gleamed softly, their surfaces reflecting the light of hundreds of lanterns that hung suspended in the air at various heights, each one glowing with that same gentle amber radiance, each one swaying almost imperceptibly, as though moved by the breath of the building itself. The floor beneath the wanderer's feet was made of smooth wooden boards, old and worn to a soft sheen by countless footsteps before. Here and there rich carpets lay spread across the wood, their patterns intricate and soothing to look upon, swirls of deep blue and gold, spirals of green and silver, designs that seemed to flow like water or drift like clouds, never quite holding still but never moving quickly enough to disturb the eye. Everywhere the wanderer looked, there were books. They lined the walls from floor to ceiling on shelves that seemed to grow organically from the wood paneling itself, their spines creating patterns of color and texture that were endlessly varied, yet somehow harmonious. Some books were tall and thin, others short and wide. Some had leather bindings in shades of burgundy and forest green and midnight blue, while others were covered in cloth of softer colors, cream and rose and pale lavender. Gold lettering caught the lamplight, titles written in languages both familiar and unknown, words that seemed to shimmer slightly as though they were not quite fixed in place. But these books on the shelves were still and silent, resting peacefully in their places. What caught the wanderer's attention most was the books that floated. Throughout the hall, volumes drifted gently through the air like leaves on a peaceful current, moving slowly from place to place with no apparent urgency. They rotated lazily as they moved, showing their covers, their spines, their pages to anyone who might be watching. Some glowed with a faint inner light, a soft blue here, a gentle green there, a warm pink or cool silver. Others trailed what looked like stardust, tiny motes of light that hung in the air behind them before slowly fading like the last notes of a lullaby. The wanderer stood still, watching this quiet dance, feeling no need to move or speak or do anything but observe. Time seemed to have loosened its grip here, and there was a sense that minutes might stretch like honey, that hours might pass like heartbeats, that nothing needed to happen quickly because everything that mattered was already present in this moment of gentle witnessing. One book drifted particularly close, moving with the aimless grace of a butterfly in warm sunshine. Its cover was the color of twilight, that particular shade of purple-blue that the sky becomes just after sunset when the first stars are beginning to appear. Silver filigree decorated its edges, and its pages glowed very faintly from within, as though the words written there were made of light that had been captured and pressed between the pages. The wanderer reached out slowly, carefully, and the book responded by drifting even closer, settling gently into the waiting hands as though it had been seeking exactly this touch. The cover was warm and smooth, the pages soft as old silk when the wanderer opened them carefully, reverently. Inside, there were words, but they shifted and changed as they were read, rearranging themselves, not in any way that caused confusion but rather adapting, becoming exactly what the reader needed to see in that moment. They spoke of rest and peace, of gentle journeys and safe harbors, of moments when the world grew soft and kind and full of quiet grace. The wanderer read slowly, letting each word settle like a smooth stone dropping into still water, creating ripples of calm that spread outward through body and mind. After a time that might have been moments or might have been much longer, the wanderer carefully closed the book and released it. The volume drifted away slowly, returning to its floating path through the hall, and the wanderer continued forward, deeper into the library. The hall seemed to stretch on, though never in a way that felt overwhelming or exhausting. There were alcoves set into the walls at intervals, each one containing a small reading nook with a cushioned chair or a window seat piled with soft pillows. Some of these alcoves held sleeping cats, curled into perfect circles of fur, their breathing slow and peaceful, their presence adding to the atmosphere of deep contentment that filled every corner of this place. In one alcove, a fireplace held a small fire that burned without crackling, its flames moving in slow, hypnotic patterns, casting dancing shadows that were more soothing than startling. The wanderer paused there for a moment, feeling the gentle warmth on face and hands, watching the flames curl and bend, fold and unfold, like dancers in some ancient, patient ceremony. Above, the ceiling revealed itself gradually as the wanderer's eyes adjusted to the way light and shadow played across its surface. It was painted, or perhaps the images were somehow embedded in the wood itself, impossible to say for certain. The painting showed a night sky full of stars, but these stars moved, very slowly, tracing their actual paths across the heavens, showing the great wheel of the cosmos in its eternal, peaceful turning. Constellations the wanderer recognized mingled with others that seemed to come from dreams, or from older times when different peoples had looked up and drawn different pictures from the same points of light. The lanterns continued to hang everywhere, their number seeming to multiply the further the wanderer walked, until the entire hall glowed with their collected warmth. Some lanterns were simple glass and metal, while others were more ornate, with panels of colored glass that cast patterns of ruby and sapphire and emerald onto the floors and walls. A few were shaped like moons, others like flowers, and some were just soft spheres of light with no container at all, held in place by nothing visible, floating freely like bubbles of luminescence in the quiet air. The wanderer passed by a table where several books lay open, their pages turning by themselves, very slowly, as though invisible readers were perusing them at a leisurely pace. Beside the book sat an hourglass filled with what looked like liquid starlight instead of sand, the silver drops falling one by one from the upper chamber to the lower, each drop creating a tiny chime of sound too soft to really hear, but felt nonetheless, a gentle music that added to the peace. As the wanderer continued walking, soft footsteps barely audible on the warm wood and quiet carpets, the hall began to gradually open up, its walls curving away to reveal new passages and doorways, new sections of this impossible library. To the left, a corridor stretched away into gentle dimness, its walls lined with what appeared to be portraits, though the subjects seemed to be sleeping in their frames, their chests rising and falling with slow breaths, their faces peaceful and content. To the right, a spiral staircase wound upward, its steps worn smooth and its railing carved with patterns of vines and flowers, all rendered in wood so dark it was almost black, polished to a deep, restful shine. But directly ahead, the hall of quiet lanterns continued for a little ways further, and at its far end, the wanderer could see something new. A figure standing perfectly still, waiting with the patience of stones and trees and ancient mountains, waiting as though time meant nothing, as though this moment of the wanderer's arrival had been anticipated not with eagerness, but with the simple certainty of knowing that all things come to pass in their proper time. The wanderer moved forward slowly, steadily, feeling no apprehension, only a gentle curiosity and a growing sense of being exactly where one needed to be, in exactly the right moment, in exactly the right place. The figure ahead remained motionless, a silhouette against the warm light, and the wanderer continued walking, each step bringing them closer to whatever gentle mysteries this night had chosen to reveal. Meeting the Dream Archivist. As the wanderer drew nearer, the figure resolved itself from shadow into form, and form into presence, and presence into something that felt both ancient and ageless, both solid and somehow made of the same soft light that filled every corner of this place. The Dream Archivist stood at the precise center of where the Hall of Quiet Lanterns opened into a wider space, a junction where several corridors met and mingled like streams flowing together. The Archivist was neither young nor old in any way that could be measured by ordinary means. Their face held the kind of peace that comes from having witnessed countless seasons pass, countless stars rise and set, countless dreams drift through the spaces between sleeping and waking. Their eyes were dark and luminous, reflecting the lamplight like still pools of water reflecting the night sky, and when those eyes met the wanderers, there was recognition there, not of a specific person but of a soul seeking rest, seeking peace, seeking something that the waking world could not quite provide. The Archivist wore robes that might have been gray, or might have been silver, or might have been the color of smoke from a fire that had burned sweetly for many hours. The fabric moved slightly even though there was no breeze, falling in soft folds that whispered against the floor, and here and there along the sleeves and hem, small symbols had been embroidered in thread that glowed very faintly, stars and moons, spirals and circles, representations of dreams rendered in patient stitches. For a long moment, neither the wanderer nor the Archivist spoke. There was no need for immediate words. The silence between them was comfortable, full of understanding, the kind of quiet that exists between old friends who have no need to fill every moment with sound. The Archivist smiled, and it was like watching dawn slowly brighten the horizon, a gradual warming that transformed their entire presence from peaceful to welcoming, from still to gently animated. When they spoke, their voice was soft and low, with a quality like cello strings played slowly, like wind moving through tall grass, like the sound of pages turning in a quiet room. "Welcome," the Archivist said, and the words seemed to settle into the air and linger there, becoming part of the atmosphere itself. "You have found your way here on a night when the stars aligned themselves just so, when the veils between worlds grew thin and soft, when hearts that seek rest can find doorways they might not find on other nights." The wanderer nodded slowly, finding that words came with surprising ease despite the dreamlike quality of everything that was happening. "I was walking," the wanderer said quietly, "and there was light between the trees." "Yes," the Archivist replied, and their voice held infinite patience, infinite kindness. "The library appears when it is needed, when someone wanders with a quiet heart through the hours that belong to sleep and dreaming. You are not the first to find this place, and you will not be the last, though each visitor discovers it in their own time, in their own way, when the moment is exactly right." The Archivist moved then, a slow turning that made their robes drift and settle, and they gestured with one hand toward the space around them, encompassing the halls and corridors, the books and lanterns, the vastness and intimacy of this impossible place. "This is the Dream Archivist's library," they said, their voice carrying a note of gentle pride, of deep affection for this place they tended. "Here we keep safe the dreams of all who sleep beneath these stars. Every dream that has ever been dreamed, every wish whispered to the night, every memory treasured in the quiet chambers of the heart, all of them find their way here eventually, to be preserved and protected, to be honored and remembered." The wanderer looked around with new understanding, seeing the books and scrolls and floating volumes with fresh eyes. Each one, then, was not simply a book but a vessel containing someone's inner world, someone's hopes and fears, and the strange poetry that emerges when consciousness loosens its grip and allows the deeper self to speak in symbols and sensations. "May I explore?" the wanderer asked, the question emerging naturally, respectfully. The Archivist's smile deepened. "Of course. That is why you are here. The library reveals itself to those who need its peace, who need to understand that their dreams matter, that their inner worlds are beautiful and worthy of preservation. I am here to guide you if you wish, or to simply keep you company as you wander. There is no hurry, no schedule to keep. Time moves differently here, and you may stay as long as you need." They began to walk, and the wanderer walked beside them, their footsteps creating a soft rhythm on the warm wooden floors. The Archivist moved with a grace that suggested they had walked these halls for longer than memory could measure, knowing every corner, every shelf, every book by some deep familiarity that went beyond mere knowledge into something more like love. "Many visitors wonder," the archivist said softly as they walked. "Whether the dreams kept here are copies or the dreams themselves. The answer is both and neither. Dreams exist in a space between the real and the imagined, between the personal and the universal. What we preserve here are essences, echoes, the truest heart of each dream distilled into a form that can be held and revisited, that can offer comfort or insight or simply the reminder that we are all dreamers, all of us, and in our dreaming we are connected to something vast and beautiful." They passed through an archway carved from a single piece of dark wood, its surface polished until it gleamed, its edges decorated with more of those softly glowing symbols. Beyond the archway, the space opened into something that might be called a room, though it felt more like a small universe unto itself. The walls here were lined with shelves that seemed to extend upward forever, disappearing into a darkness that was not frightening but rather restful, like closing one's eyes. The shelves held not only books but also other objects. Glass bottles that contained swirling mists of color, small boxes carved from crystal that pulsed with gentle light, scrolls tied with ribbons of silk in every imaginable shade, and objects whose purposes were mysterious but whose beauty was undeniable. "This is one of the reading rooms," the archivist explained, their voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking too loudly might disturb the peace. "There are many such rooms throughout the library, each one dedicated to different types of dreams. This particular room holds the dreams of childhood, those first adventures into sleep when everything was new and the boundary between waking and dreaming was even thinner than it is in later years." The wanderer moved slowly into the room, feeling drawn to explore, and the archivist followed at a gentle pace, their presence a comfort, a reassurance that in this place nothing could bring harm, that everything existed only to provide solace and understanding. Along one wall, a series of small alcoves had been carved into the shelves, and in each alcove sat a cushion, and on each cushion rested an open book, its pages glowing very softly. The wanderer approached one of these alcoves and looked down at the book there. The pages showed not words but moving images, like watching a dream unfold in real time. A child ran through a field of flowers taller than houses, laughing, the flowers swaying and whispering in voices too soft to understand, but clearly friendly, clearly full of joy. "You may watch," the archivist said gently, "or you may move on. Everything here is an invitation, never a demand. The library exists to serve those who visit it, to give them what they need, whether that is entertainment or enlightenment, distraction or deep rest." The wanderer watched the dream child run through the impossible flowers for a few moments longer, feeling a warmth spread through their chest, a kind of second-hand joy, a reminder of what it felt like to experience wonder so purely, so completely. Then, with a small smile, the wanderer moved on, trusting that the archivist would lead them to other marvels, other gentle beauties. They walked together through the room, the archivist occasionally pausing to point out a particular dream that they thought might interest their guest, speaking in that same soft, unhurried voice about the dreamer who had dreamed it, about the circumstances that had shaped this particular vision of sleep. "Here," the archivist said, stopping before a book bound in blue leather so dark it was nearly black, "is the dream of a sailor who spent 40 years at sea and dreamed every night of the ocean, of waves and wind, and the way moonlight looks when it scatters across moving water. The dream is peaceful, full of the rhythm of tides, the breathing of the earth itself. Some visitors find it deeply soothing to read. And here, beside a window that looked out onto a view that should not have been possible, a meadow under starlight, though the library surely had other rooms beyond this wall, is the dream of a gardener who tended the same plot of earth for 60 seasons and dreamed of watching things grow, of the quiet miracle of seed becoming flower, of roots going deep into dark soil while above, beauty unfolds in color and scent." They moved on, deeper into the room, and the wanderer felt something loosening inside, some tension that had been carried for so long it had become invisible, like a knot being gently untied, strand by strand, until what remained was simply softness, simply the ability to breathe fully and deeply without reservation. The archivist led them to a comfortable chair positioned before a small fireplace where no fire burned, but warm light seemed to emanate from the hearth nonetheless. "Rest here for a moment," they suggested kindly. "Let the library settle around you. There is much to explore, but there is also value in simply being still, in allowing this place to work its gentle magic without effort or intention." The wanderer sank into the chair, which seemed to adjust itself to provide perfect support, perfect comfort. The archivist stood nearby, their hands folded peacefully, their expression serene, content to wait in silence for as long as needed. And in that moment, sitting in a room full of childhood dreams in a library that existed outside of ordinary time, the wanderer felt something they had not felt in longer than memory could measure. The sense of being exactly where they belonged, held safely by something larger and kinder than the waking world, embraced by peace that asked nothing in return, that simply existed, steady and sure as starlight, as patient as the turning of the earth through its ancient dance around the sun. The gallery of floating books. After a time of perfect stillness, a time that might have been 5 minutes or might have been an hour, it was impossible to say and somehow entirely unimportant. The archivist stirred gently, the movement slow and careful, like someone waking from a pleasant rest or beginning to rise from a warm bath. The wanderer looked up, feeling refreshed in a way that had nothing to do with sleep, but everything to do with the quality of rest that comes from being completely at ease, completely safe. "There is something I think you might like to see," the archivist said softly, their voice holding a note of quiet pleasure, as though they were about to share a favorite place with a dear friend. "If you feel ready to continue, that is. We can stay here as long as you wish. The library has infinite patience." The wanderer rose from the chair, feeling surprisingly light, as though the weight of ordinary concerns had been set down somewhere and forgotten, at least for now. "I would like to see more," the wanderer said, and was pleased to find that their own voice had taken on some of that same quality of deep calm, of unhurried certainty. The archivist nodded, clearly pleased, and turned toward a doorway the wanderer had not noticed before, though it seemed entirely natural that it should be there, opening onto a corridor that glowed with that same warm, amber light that suffused every part of this place. They walked together, their footsteps soft and measured, creating a gentle rhythm that was itself a kind of meditation, a pattern of sound that the mind could follow down and down into deeper states of peace. The corridor they walked through was narrower than the great hall of quiet lanterns had been, but no less beautiful. The walls here were not wood-paneled, but rather covered in what appeared to be tapestries, though they might have been paintings. The images seemed to shift slightly when viewed from the corner of the eye, as though they were depicting not static scenes but living moments, memories caught and held in thread and dye. One tapestry showed a garden at twilight, flowers closing their petals for the night while fireflies began their dance among the leaves. Another depicted a city street at evening, windows glowing yellow-warm against the blue darkness, a cat sitting on a doorstep watching the first stars appear. Each image was peaceful, contemplative, inviting the eye to linger and rest, to find comfort in these captured moments of beauty and stillness. The wanderer and the archivist walked side by side, neither speaking, both content with the companionable silence and the soft sound of their footsteps on stone floors worn smooth by untold years of passage. Occasionally, a book would drift past them, floating through the air as books did throughout this library, moving with that same aimless grace, and the archivist would sometimes reach out to touch one gently, a gesture of affection, of recognition, as though greeting an old friend. After a time, the corridor began to widen, and the quality of light began to change, becoming not brighter, but somehow more luminous, more alive. The walls fell away on either side, and the wanderer found themselves standing at the entrance to a vast space that took their breath away with its quiet magnificence. This was the gallery of floating books, and it was perhaps the most beautiful thing the wanderer had ever seen. The space stretched upward and outward in all directions, so large that its boundaries were lost in soft, glowing mist that hung in the air like clouds seen from a mountain peak. But unlike the reading rooms and corridors they had passed through, here there were no shelves, no walls lined with spines and bindings. Here the books themselves filled the air, thousands upon thousands of them, floating freely through the vast space, drifting and turning and moving in slow, intricate patterns that were beautiful to watch, like watching a murmuration of starlings at sunset or the movement of aurora lights across a northern sky. Each book glowed with its own particular light. Some shone soft blue, like moonlight on snow. Others glimmered green as spring leaves or gold as harvest wheat or rose pink as the inside of certain shells. Some were silver white as stars, while others pulsed with deeper colors, amethyst and sapphire, emerald and ruby, amber and pearl. Together, they created a symphony of light that moved through the space in waves and spirals, in cascades and constellations, their combined radiance filling the gallery with a glow that was somehow both energizing and deeply soothing. The wanderer stood at the edge of this vast space, on a platform that jutted out into it like a pier extending into an ocean. The floor of the platform was made of dark glass or polished stone, impossible to say which, and it reflected the lights of the floating books, creating the illusion of standing between two skies, both above and below filled with softly glowing stars. "This is where the dreams come when they first arrive," the archivist explained, their voice quiet with reverence, with love for this place. "Every dream, as it is dreamed, sends out a sort of echo or resonance, and that echo finds its way here, taking form as a book or scroll or vessel of some kind. The dreams float here for a time, drifting, settling into themselves, before they are eventually guided to their proper places in the deeper archives. But some dreams choose to remain here, floating, preferring the freedom of movement to the stillness of the shelves." The wanderer watched as a book drifted past, close enough to touch. It was bound in leather the color of storm clouds, and its pages glowed a soft violet that reminded them of twilight skies. Without thinking, the wanderer reached out, and the book responded immediately, drifting into their hands as naturally as a bird landing on an offered branch. The moment the wanderer's fingers touched the cover, they could feel the dream within it, could sense its essence without even needing to open the pages. It was a dream of flying, of soaring above landscapes both familiar and strange, feeling the wind rush past, feeling the absolute freedom of movement through 3 dimensions, no longer bound by the heavy pull of earth. It was a joyful dream, full of wonder and delight, and just holding it brought some of that joy into the wanderer's own heart. "Beautiful, isn't it?" the archivist said softly. "That particular dream has been floating here for nearly 80 years. The dreamer has long since passed on, but their dream remains, still fresh, still full of life and joy. Sometimes I think the dreams are more real than the dreamers, more lasting, more true to the essence of what it means to be alive." The wanderer carefully released the book, and it drifted away, continuing its endless journey through the gallery, its violet light pulsing gently like a heartbeat, steady and sure. Together, the wanderer and the archivist moved further onto the platform, which extended out into the gallery like a walkway through clouds. Above and below and all around, the books continued their slow dance, their lights creating patterns that were hypnotic to watch, that pulled the eye and mind into a state of profound relaxation, of openness to wonder. Some books traveled alone, while others moved in groups, small formations of 3 or 4 or 7, drifting together as though they shared some connection, some affinity of theme or emotion, or the particular quality of the dreams they contained. One such group passed nearby, 5 books of varying sizes, all glowing a warm amber gold, and the archivist gestured toward them with obvious fondness. "Those are dreams of home," they explained. "Dreams of warmth and safety, of familiar rooms and beloved faces, of the feeling of belonging that we all seek, consciously or not. They stay together because they resonate with the same frequency, the same deep longing for comfort and peace." The wanderer watched the golden books drift past and felt a warmth spread through their chest, a feeling of nostalgia mixed with contentment, as though the dreams themselves were sharing their emotional essence with anyone who took the time to truly see them, to honor them with attention. Further out in the gallery, larger formations of books moved in more complex patterns. There was a spiral of silver-white volumes, perhaps 30 or 40 of them, rotating slowly around a central axis, creating a miniature galaxy of light. The archivist led the wanderer closer, walking along the platform as it extended further into the space, and explained that these were the dreams of seekers, of those who spent their lives searching for meaning, for truth, for understanding of the great mysteries. "They circle because that is the nature of seeking," the archivist said. "We move around the truth in spirals, getting closer with each rotation, each pass, but never quite arriving at a final answer because the truth itself is always in motion, always revealing new aspects of itself." The wanderer understood, or at least felt that they did, and was content to let that partial understanding settle into their mind like snow falling on already snow-covered ground, adding to the depth, to the soft accumulation of peace and insight. They stood together for a long while, the wanderer and the archivist, watching the books move through their aerial ballet, and the wanderer noticed that their breathing had synchronized itself to the movement of the nearest volumes, breathing in as a cluster of blue books drifted closer, breathing out as they moved away, creating a rhythm that required no thought, no effort, only surrender to the gentle pattern. "May I ask," the wanderer said after a long silence, "how many dreams are kept here?" The archivist smiled, that same gentle warming of their features. "All of them," they replied simply. "Every dream ever dreamed, from the first beings who discovered sleep to those who will dream centuries hence. The library exists outside of linear time, you see. It has always been here and always will be, collecting dreams, preserving them, honoring them. And you tend to all of them? The wanderer asked, awed by the immensity of such a task. I have help, the archivist said with a soft laugh, a sound like wind chimes moving in a breeze. There are others who serve the library, though you may not see them. They prefer to work in the quieter hours, in the spaces between spaces. And the library itself helps, in ways both subtle and profound. It is alive in its fashion, aware and caring. It knows what each dream needs, where each book should rest, what each visitor seeks. I am simply the one who greets guests, who offers guidance. The library does the real work. This explanation satisfied the wanderer completely, and they lapsed again into comfortable silence, watching a stream of emerald-green books flow past like a ribbon of light, like a river in the air, their surfaces reflecting and refracting the light of other books nearby, creating patterns of shadow and radiance that were endlessly varied, endlessly beautiful. After another span of timeless time, the archivist stirred gently. There is more to see, they said, though we can stay here as long as you like. Some visitors spend hours in the gallery, simply watching, simply being present to the movement and the light. There is no wrong way to experience this place. The wanderer felt torn between the desire to stay in this beautiful space forever and the curiosity about what other wonders the library might hold. Finally, gently, the wanderer spoke. I think I would like to see more, if that's all right, but I hope I might return here before I leave. Of course, the archivist said warmly. The gallery will be here whenever you wish to return to it. Nothing in the library ever truly goes away. Everything waits patiently for the moment when it is needed again. They turned together and began walking back along the platform toward the corridor they had entered from, and the wanderer took one last, long look at the gallery of floating books, at the thousands of glowing volumes drifting through the vast space like thoughts moving through a peaceful mind, like stars moving through the night sky, like all the dreams of all the world made visible and beautiful and preserved forever in light and motion and the deep, abiding peace of this impossible, wonderful place, the Chamber of Forgotten Whispers. The corridor they entered was different from the one they had walked through before, though the wanderer could not have said exactly how or when the change had occurred. Perhaps the library itself shifted and rearranged according to the needs of its visitors, or perhaps there were simply so many passages and halls that no two journeys through this place were ever quite the same. Either way, the wanderer felt no confusion, only a deepening sense of trust in the archivist's guidance and in the library's gentle wisdom. This corridor was narrower and more intimate than the others, its walls close enough that the wanderer could have reached out and touched both sides at once if they had wished. The stone here was a warm gray, smooth as river rocks, and set into the walls at intervals were small niches, each one holding a single candle that burned with a flame the color of honey, steady and still, casting pools of golden light that overlapped and mingled, creating a soft glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The archivist walked slowly, their robes whispering against the stone floor, and the wanderer matched their pace, feeling no need to hurry, content to move through this peaceful space one slow step at a time. The air here carried a different scent, something like aged paper and dried lavender, like the particular smell of old churches or libraries in the waking world, that mixture of time and stillness and countless quiet hours accumulated into atmosphere. Where we are going now, the archivist said softly, their voice barely above a murmur, is a place that many visitors find particularly moving. It is called the Chamber of Forgotten Whispers, and it holds the dreams that their dreamers no longer remember, the visions that slipped away upon waking and were never written down, never shared, never consciously recalled. The wanderer felt a small pang at this, thinking of all the dreams they themselves had lost to the morning light, all those strange and beautiful journeys that had dissolved like mist the moment consciousness returned. That seems sad, the wanderer said quietly. The archivist glanced at them with understanding in those deep, luminous eyes. It might seem so at first, they agreed, but I have come to see it differently over the years. These forgotten dreams, they are not lost. They are here, preserved and honored, and though their dreamers may not consciously recall them, the dreams still influence them, still shape their inner worlds in subtle ways. Nothing is ever truly lost. Everything matters, whether remembered or not. They reached the end of the corridor, where an archway opened into a chamber beyond. The archway was carved from pale stone, almost white, and covered in what looked like thousands of tiny words, phrases, fragments of sentences, all carved so small and fine that reading them would require close inspection. The wanderer paused to look more closely, and saw that the words were in many different languages, some familiar, others utterly unknown, but all seemingly random fragments. Blue door, mother's voice, the sound of rain, flying over mountains, a garden of glass flowers. These are pieces of forgotten dreams, the archivist explained. Small fragments that float up to the surface of memory sometimes, like fish breaking the surface of a deep pond, only to sink back down into the depths before they can be truly grasped. We honor them here at the entrance to this chamber, acknowledging that even the smallest fragment has value, has meaning. They passed through the archway together, and the wanderer found themselves in a space that was unlike anything they had seen so far in the library. The chamber was circular and domed, its ceiling rising high above and painted or perhaps constructed to look like the night sky, complete with stars that twinkled very gently, their light cool and distant and somehow comforting in its constancy. But it was not the ceiling that drew the eye. It was what filled the chamber itself. Hanging in the air throughout the entire space, suspended from nothing visible, were countless small objects, each one glowing with a faint, silvery white light that pulsed slowly, like breathing, like a heartbeat slowed down until each beat was separated from the next by long, peaceful intervals. The objects were varied in form. Some were crystals, others were small glass orbs, still others looked like folded pieces of silk or paper, or small boxes no bigger than a thumb, or shapes that defied easy description, geometric and organic at once. Each object, the wanderer understood somehow without being told, contained a forgotten dream, a vision that had slipped away from conscious memory but was held here, safe and honored, preserved in the library's infinite care. The archivist moved into the chamber with obvious reverence, their steps even slower than before, their movements careful and deliberate, as though walking through a space so sacred that any disturbance of the air might be felt as a violation. The wanderer followed, matching that same quality of gentle respect, of deep acknowledgement for the preciousness of what this place contained. "You may touch them if you wish," the archivist said quietly. "Though be prepared, sometimes when you touch a forgotten dream, it awakens something in you, some echo or resonance, a feeling of déjà vu or a sudden surge of emotion whose source you cannot name. It is safe, but it can be intense." The wanderer moved slowly among the hanging objects, looking at each one with care, with attention. They were beautiful in their variety, in their strangeness. One crystal caught the light and broke it into soft rainbows that danced across nearby surfaces. A glass orb held what looked like swirling fog or perhaps water, its contents moving slowly, perpetually. A piece of silk, folded into an intricate pattern, glowed from within as though lit by a candle flame. After a time, the wanderer reached out toward one object that felt particularly compelling, though there was no logical reason for the attraction. It was a small box made of some dark wood, its surface carved with spirals and waves, and it hung at exactly the right height to rest comfortably in an outstretched palm. The moment the wanderer's fingers made contact with the box, a sensation washed over them, not quite a vision, not quite a memory, but something in between. There was the feeling of standing in a vast open space, perhaps a field or a desert, under a sky so full of stars it seemed impossible, seemed like something that could never exist in the waking world. There was a sense of deep peace, of being utterly alone but not lonely, of being small beneath the cosmos but not insignificant, rather perfectly placed, perfectly positioned to witness beauty. There was a sound distant and haunting, like singing or like wine through stone canyons, and there was a smell, sharp and clean, like the air after lightning. And then it was gone, slipping away as gently as it had come, leaving behind only a warmth in the chest, a sense of having touched something profound without fully grasping it, like catching a glimpse of a great truth from the corner of the eye, and then losing it when trying to look directly. The wanderer released the box, and it resumed its slow swaying, its gentle pulse of light, and the archivist stood nearby, watching with patient understanding. "Did you feel it?" they asked softly. "Yes," the wanderer replied, their voice full of wonder. "I did, but I couldn't hold on to it. That is the nature of forgotten dreams," the archivist said. "They touch us, they move us, they shape us, but we cannot possess them, cannot fix them in place with words or conscious thought. They exist in the realm of feeling, of pure experience unmediated by language or logic. That is their gift and their nature." The wanderer nodded slowly, understanding or at least beginning to, and continued moving through the chamber, occasionally reaching out to touch another object, each time experiencing some new sensation, some echo of a dream that had once moved through someone's sleeping mind and then drifted away, leaving only the faintest trace, a whisper of something that had been. One orb filled them with a sense of warmth and safety, like being held by someone who loved them unconditionally. Another crystal brought a flash of color, so vivid it was almost overwhelming, a saturation of beauty that defied description. A folded piece of paper, when touched, whispered without words about journeys and farewells and the bittersweet ache of change. The archivist moved through the chamber as well, occasionally reaching out to touch objects themselves, though whether they could feel the dreams contained within, or whether they simply touched them in greeting, in acknowledgement, the wanderer could not say. There was something deeply moving about watching the archivist move among these forgotten things with such care, such obvious love, tending to dreams that no one else would ever remember, honoring experiences that had been lost to conscious awareness but never lost to the library's infinite memory. Time stretched and softened in the chamber of forgotten whispers. The wanderer moved slowly from object to object, touching some, simply looking at others, letting the peaceful atmosphere soak into their bones, into their breath, into the deep places where rest lives and worry dissolves. The pulsing lights of the suspended objects created a rhythm that was hypnotic to watch, and the wanderer found their breathing synchronizing to it, found their heartbeat slowing to match that patient pulse, that gentle reminder that existence continues, moment by moment, breath by breath, heartbeat by heartbeat, whether remembered or forgotten, whether held in consciousness or allowed to drift away like clouds across an endless sky. The archivist came to stand beside the wanderer after a time, and together they stood in silence, watching the lights pulse, watching the objects sway infinitesimally in currents of air too subtle to feel, but strong enough to keep everything in constant, gentle motion. "Some visitors," the archivist said eventually, their voice barely disturbing the quiet, "come to this chamber and weep. Not from sadness, but from a kind of relief, from the understanding that even what we lose is not truly gone, that even what we forget is still held safely somewhere, still honored, still real. There is comfort in that, I think. The knowledge that we do not have to hold on to everything, that we can let things go and trust that they will be preserved, that the universe itself, or at least this small corner of it, keeps safe what we cannot." The wanderer felt the truth of these words settling into them like seeds into soil, taking root, beginning the slow process of growing into understanding. They did not need to remember every dream, every moment, every experience. It was enough to have lived them, to have moved through them, to have been shaped by them. The library would remember. The library would keep safe what could not be consciously held. "Thank you," the wanderer said softly, "for bringing me here." The archivist smiled, that gentle warming that transformed their entire presence. "It is my honor," they replied. "And there is still more to see, though only if you wish to continue. We can rest here as long as you like." Some visitors spend hours in this chamber, moving among the forgotten dreams, letting themselves feel without trying to understand, letting themselves simply be present to mystery and beauty. The wanderer considered, feeling the pull of rest, the temptation to stay in this peaceful space indefinitely. But there was also curiosity, a gentle desire to see what other wonders the library held, what other forms of comfort and beauty might be waiting in the halls and chambers yet unexplored. "I think," the wanderer said slowly, "I would like to see more. But gently, slowly, with no hurry." "Of course," the archivist agreed. "That is the only way to move through this place. The library rewards patience, rewards presence, rewards those who allow themselves to experience fully without rushing toward the next thing. Come, let me show you something else, something I think you will find equally beautiful, equally soothing." They moved together toward another archway on the far side of the chamber, and as they walked, the wanderer glanced back one more time at the hanging objects, at the forgotten dreams pulsing with their gentle silver light, and felt grateful, deeply grateful, for this place that honored what was lost, that held safe what had slipped away, that reminded all who visited that nothing, truly nothing, was ever wasted or gone beyond recovery, beyond love, beyond the possibility of being treasured by someone somewhere, in some form that transcended ordinary understanding. The hall of moonlit shelves. The archway they passed through was made of pale stone that seemed to glow with its own soft luminescence, like moonlight solidified into architecture. As they crossed the threshold, the wanderer noticed that the temperature shifted slightly, becoming cooler but not uncomfortably so. Rather, it was the perfect coolness of evening air after a warm day, the kind of temperature that makes the skin feel alive and grateful, that invites deep breathing and easy movement. The space they entered was a hall, long and graceful, its proportions somehow both grand and intimate at once. The ceiling was high but not so high as to feel distant or cold, and it was made of what appeared to be glass or crystal, though no ordinary glass could look quite like this. Through it, visible as clearly as if there were no barrier at all, stretched the night sky. And such a night sky it was, deeper and richer than any the wanderer had ever seen in the waking world, scattered with stars so numerous they seemed to form a continuous field of light, a river of brilliance flowing across the darkness. But it was not the ceiling that gave this hall its name. It was the shelves. They lined both walls, stretching from floor to ceiling, made of wood so pale it was almost white, like birch or aspen, smooth and cool to the touch. And every shelf, every surface, seemed to catch and hold the light that filtered down from above, the starlight and moonlight. For yes, there was a moon visible through the crystal ceiling, full and luminous and impossibly close-seeming, so that the entire hall glowed with a soft, silvery radiance that shifted and moved as the celestial bodies above continued their slow journey across the heavens. The books on these shelves were different from those the wanderer had seen elsewhere in the library. These volumes were all bound in pale materials, white leather and cream-colored cloth, covers of silver and pearl, and the palest blue, like ice or morning sky. Some had no titles visible on their spines, while others bore writing in silver ink that caught the light and seemed to float slightly above the surface of the binding, shimmering and alive. "The Hall of Moonlit Shelves," the archivist said softly, their voice taking on an even gentler quality than usual, as though speaking too loudly would disturb the perfect peace of this place, "contains the dreams of nighttime itself. These are the dreams that come in the deepest hours, when the world is most fully asleep, when consciousness drifts furthest from the shores of waking. They are quiet dreams, contemplative dreams, visions that move slowly and speak in whispers rather than shouts." The wanderer moved closer to the nearest shelf, drawn by the beauty of the books, by the way they seemed to rest so peacefully against each other, spine to spine, like sleepers arranged in a row, all breathing in perfect harmony. One hand reached out, fingers hovering just above the spines, not quite touching but feeling the subtle emanations from each volume, the particular quality of dream contained within. "May I?" the wanderer asked, glancing at the archivist. "Of course," came the gentle reply. "Take your time. Choose any book that calls to you, and you may read as much or as little as you wish. There is a reading area further down the hall, with comfortable places to sit. Or you may read here, standing, letting the words wash over you like moonlight. However feels right." The wanderer's fingers came to rest on one volume, a book bound in cloth the color of fog, its spine unmarked by any title but somehow feeling right, feeling meant for this moment. Carefully, reverently, the wanderer drew it from the shelf and held it, feeling its weight, not heavy but substantial, real, present. The cover was soft beneath exploring fingertips, and when opened, the pages released a scent of night-blooming flowers, of cool air and distant water, of all the subtle fragrances that emerge when the sun goes down and the world transforms into its quieter, more mysterious self. The wanderer began to read, standing there in the silvery light, and the words on the page seemed to glow very faintly, just enough to be easily visible without strain. The dream recorded there was simple and profound at once. It told of walking through an empty city at midnight, streets silent and still, buildings rising on either side like cliffs, windows dark or glowing softly with the occasional lamp left burning. There was no one else in sight, and yet the dreamer felt no fear, only a peaceful solitude, a sense of having the entire world to themselves for these few hours, of moving through familiar spaces made strange and beautiful by the absence of crowds, by the presence of moonlight painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. The wanderer read slowly, letting each sentence settle, feeling the dream seep into their consciousness like ink into paper, leaving a gentle mark, a subtle influence. Their breathing slowed further, their shoulders dropped, releasing tension they had not known they were carrying. The words on the page seemed to pulse with the rhythm of their heartbeat, or perhaps their heartbeat had adjusted itself to match the rhythm of the words. Impossible to say which, and ultimately it did not matter. After a time, the wanderer closed the book carefully and returned it to its place on the shelf, where it settled with a soft sigh, as though grateful to be home. The archivist stood nearby, patient as always, their expression serene, content to wait for as long as needed. Together they began to walk down the hall, moving slowly, their footsteps making barely any sound on the smooth stone floor. The moonlight continued to pour down through the crystalline ceiling, and the wanderer noticed that it seemed to be moving, shifting gradually as the moon above moved through its arc across the sky. Time was passing here, but slowly, gently, without urgency or demand. Along the walls, in addition to the shelves of books, there were small alcoves set at irregular intervals, and in each alcove sat something interesting, something worth pausing to observe. In one, a globe of the Earth rotated very slowly, showing the progression of day and night across its surface, the line between light and darkness creeping gradually from east to west, marking the eternal rhythm of the planet's turning. The oceans gleamed blue-black, and tiny lights marked cities, pinpricks of human presence scattered across the continents. In another alcove, a collection of crystals had been arranged on a bed of dark velvet, and each crystal was shaped and positioned to catch the moonlight in a particular way, breaking it into component colors or focusing it into beams that painted patterns on the alcove's back wall. The effect was mesmerizing, beautiful, an interaction of natural form and natural light that created something very like art, very like music rendered visible. The archivist paused before this display and gestured toward it with obvious affection. These crystals were found in the caves beneath the library, they explained. Yes, there are caves, entire systems of them, though few visitors explore that deeply. The crystals grow there in the darkness, and once a year, at a particular alignment of Earth and Moon and stars, I come and select a few to bring up here, to let them experience light for a while. They seem to enjoy it, if crystals can be said to enjoy anything. At the very least, they respond to it, they come alive in a way they cannot in the darkness below. The wanderer watched the play of light through crystal, watched the colors dance and shift, and felt a kinship with these stones drawn up from darkness into light, given the chance to shine, to show what they contained, what beauty had been locked within them waiting for the right conditions to be revealed. They moved on, passing more alcoves, each one containing some small treasure or curiosity. A bowl filled with what looked like liquid silver, but might have been mercury or something more mysterious, its surface perfectly smooth, perfectly reflective, showing the moon above in miniature. A book that lay open to a page covered entirely in musical notation, though what the song might sound like was left to imagination. A small garden growing in a glass case, its plants all white and silver and pale blue, night-blooming flowers in full blossom, releasing their perfume into the sealed environment where it would linger forever, never fading. Eventually the hall opened into a wider space, and here the archivist had promised were places to sit and read. The wanderer found a window seat, wide and deep, piled high with cushions in shades of gray and silver and palest blue. The window looked out onto a view that should not have been possible, a landscape of rolling hills beneath the same moon that hung in the crystalline ceiling, a scene of perfect peace, of gentle slopes and distant trees rendered in monochrome by the lunar light. The wanderer sank into the cushions, which adjusted themselves to provide perfect support, perfect comfort. The archivist settled into a nearby chair, their robes pooling around them, their hands folded in their lap, their expression one of deep contentment. "This is one of my favorite places in the entire library," the archivist said quietly. "I often come here when I need rest, when I need to remember why I do this work, why I tend these dreams and guide visitors through these halls. There is something about moonlight that clarifies without being harsh, that reveals without exposing, that illuminates while still honoring shadows and mysteries." The wanderer understood completely. The moonlight falling through the ceiling, reflected by the pale shelves, caught in the pages of countless books, created an atmosphere unlike anything else. Peaceful but not sleepy, clear but not stark, quiet but not empty. It was a quality of being that balanced perfectly between rest and awareness, between sleep and waking, a liminal state where both were possible, where neither dominated. For a long while neither spoke. The archivist sat in serene stillness, eyes half closed, perhaps meditating or perhaps simply being present to the moment, to the peace of this place. The wanderer rested against the cushions, gaze drifting from the window to the shelves to the distant ceiling, watching the stars slowly turn, watching the moon gradually shift its position, feeling time move like honey, like the tide, like the breath moving in and out of the lungs, inevitable and gentle and requiring nothing, asking nothing, simply continuing, simply being. At some point, the wanderer noticed that the archivist had risen and was moving along the shelves, selecting books seemingly at random and bringing them to a nearby table. When several had been gathered, the archivist returned to their chair and gestured for the wanderer to join them at the table. "I thought you might like to see these particular dreams," the archivist said as the wanderer approached. "They are some of the gentlest in the entire collection, dreams that people return to again and again in their sleep, finding comfort there, finding respite from the challenges of waking life." The books the archivist had selected were all small, none larger than a hand could easily hold, and all bound in the softest materials, suede and silk and what felt like velvet, their covers smooth and soothing to touch. The wanderer picked up one at random and opened it, and the dream inside was brief but perfect. Walking through a meadow of wildflowers on a summer evening, the air full of the smell of grass and growth, the sky painted in shades of gold and rose by the setting sun, bees still humming their last songs of the day among the blossoms. Another book held a dream of sitting in a library. Perhaps even this library, the wanderer thought, beside a fire, rain falling outside, a cup of tea cooling slowly on a side table, a book open in the lap, words moving across the page like a gentle current carrying the reader downstream toward understanding, toward peace. Each dream was a small gift, a moment of perfect contentment captured and preserved, offered now to anyone who needed to remember that such moments existed, that such peace was possible, that the world contained within it these pockets of absolute rightness, these spaces where everything aligned and even breathing felt like a celebration. The wanderer read through each small book, taking time with every dream, and felt something loosening even further inside, some last knot of tension unwinding, releasing, letting go. The archivist watched with quiet satisfaction, clearly pleased to share these treasures, to witness their effect. When all the books had been read and carefully closed and stacked in a neat pile on the table, the archivist spoke again. "These dreams," they said, "are what I think of as the library's heart. Not the most dramatic or exciting dreams, not the most complex or profound, but the ones that sustain, that nourish, that remind us why rest matters, why peace is worth seeking, worth protecting, worth returning to again and again." The wanderer nodded, throat tight with emotion, unable to speak for a moment, overcome by the simple beauty of what they had just experienced, by the generosity of this place, of this guide, of this strange and wonderful night. Finally, voice soft, the wanderer managed to say, "Thank you for all of this." The archivists smiled their gentle smile. "There is more still," they said, "if you have the energy, the interest. But we can also rest here longer, or I can guide you to one of the library's many resting rooms, places specifically designed for sleep, for dreaming, where visitors can lie down and let themselves drift into their own visions, knowing they are safe, knowing their dreams will eventually join all these others, becoming part of the great collection, the great honoring of all that humans experience when they surrender to sleep." The wanderer considered, feeling the pull of rest, the temptation to find one of those resting rooms and let themselves drift away into dreams. But there was also still that gentle curiosity, that desire to see more, to experience more of what this place had to offer before surrendering to sleep. "Perhaps a little more," the wanderer said. "If that's all right. I feel I could wander here forever and still not see everything." "That is absolutely true," the archivist agreed. "The library is infinite in its variety, endless in its offerings. But come, let me show you something else, something I think will add to your sense of peace, your sense of wonder at all the forms that dreams can take." They rose together, leaving the cozy reading area, leaving the hall of moonlit shelves behind, though the wanderer knew its beauty would remain vivid in memory, would become part of the internal landscape carried forward from this night, and they moved deeper into the library, deeper into the mysteries and marvels that awaited in the quiet halls and chambers where dreams lived forever, held safe, held sacred, held in love. Dreams stored in starlight bottles. The passage they followed now descended gently, a gradual slope rather than stairs, making the transition so smooth that the wanderer barely noticed they were going down, deeper into the library's structure, or perhaps sideways into some other dimension where depth and height and ordinary spatial relationships ceased to have their usual meanings. The walls here were made of smooth stone, dark as midnight but flecked throughout with what looked like tiny stars, so that walking through this passage felt like moving through space itself, through the great dark between celestial bodies where light was scarce but not entirely absent. Small lanterns hung at long intervals, their light dim and blue-toned, casting just enough illumination to see by without disturbing the essential darkness, the fundamental quiet of this deeper place. The air was cool and still, and it carried a scent that reminded the wanderer of winter nights, of frost and clean emptiness, of the particular smell of air so cold it seems to have no scent at all, only a sharp clarity that makes the inside of the nose tingle. The archivist moved with sure steps, clearly knowing this path intimately, and the wanderer followed close behind, trusting completely in their guide's knowledge, their wisdom, their care. There was no fear in this darkness, no anxiety about where they were going or what they might find. The library had proven itself over and over to be a place of safety, of beauty, of gentle revelations, and the wanderer had no reason to believe that would change now. After a time that might have been minutes or might have been much longer, The wanderer had long since stopped trying to measure time in this place. The passage opened into a chamber, and the wanderer caught their breath at what they saw. The chamber was circular and vast, its ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness, its walls curving away on all sides. But what made this space extraordinary, what made it unlike anything the wanderer had ever seen or imagined, were the bottles. They filled the chamber from floor to ceiling, arranged on shelves that spiraled up and around the walls in a pattern that was both orderly and organic, like the inside of a nautilus shell or the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower head. Each shelf held hundreds of bottles, and there were hundreds of shelves, perhaps thousands, creating a dizzying array that seemed to extend infinitely upward into the shadows above. The bottles themselves varied in size and shape, some tall and narrow, others short and wide, some round as bubbles, others angular and geometric. They were made of glass or crystal, each one perfectly transparent, and inside each one, captured and contained, was light. Not ordinary light, but starlight, each bottle holding the light of a particular star. And because each star's light was unique, each bottle glowed with a subtly different quality of illumination. Some were cool and blue-white, like ice catching moonlight. Others were warm and golden, like honey held up to the sun. Still others ranged through the spectrum, soft pink and pale green, deep amber and silver blue, colors that had no names because they existed only in starlight, only in the particular frequencies emitted by distant suns burning across impossible distances. The combined effect of all these bottles, all these captured stars glowing gently in the darkness, was breathtaking. The chamber sparkled and shimmered, pulsed and breathed with light, creating an atmosphere that felt both vast as the cosmos and intimate as a single candle flame. "This," the archivist said softly, their voice full of reverence, "is where we keep the dreams that are stored in starlight bottles. These are the wishes made upon stars, the hopes whispered to the night sky, the dreams dreamed by those who looked up and felt the pull of something infinite, something eternal. Each bottle contains not just the light of a star, but a dream that has been associated with that star, linked to it by the act of wishing, of hoping, of reaching towards something beyond the ordinary bounds of earthly life." The wanderer moved slowly into the chamber, turning in a circle to take it all in, to try to comprehend the scope of what they were seeing. The bottles glowed and pulsed in subtle rhythms, not all together but in overlapping patterns, creating waves of light that moved through the chamber like wind moving through grain fields, like clouds passing across the face of the moon, visible and beautiful and somehow musical, though no sound could be heard beyond the soft breathing of the wanderer and the archivist and the almost imperceptible hum of existence itself. "May I touch them?" the wanderer asked, drawn toward the nearest shelf where bottles of various sizes stood in neat rows, each one containing its small universe of captured light. "Please do," the archivist encouraged. "The bottles are warm to the touch, and if you hold one close and quiet your mind, you can often feel the dream inside, can sense what was wished for, what was hoped for. Not in words, usually, but in feelings, in images, in the pure essence of longing and aspiration." The wanderer reached for a bottle that stood at eye level, a vessel about the size of a pear, made of crystal so clear it seemed to be made of solidified air. Inside, starlight glowed a soft gold touched with rose, warm and welcoming. The wanderer lifted the bottle carefully from its place, surprised by its warmth, not hot, but pleasantly warm, like holding a cup of tea or a smooth stone that had been lying in sunshine. Holding the bottle close, the wanderer closed their eyes and let their awareness settle, become quiet, become receptive. And gradually, like dawn lightening the sky, an impression formed. It was a dream of home, not a specific house or place, but the feeling of home, of belonging, of having a place in the world where one was welcomed and cherished, where return was always possible, where love waited patiently no matter how far one wandered. It was a simple dream, a fundamental one, and feeling it brought tears to the wanderer's eyes, gentle tears of recognition, of shared humanity, of understanding that this was what everyone wanted really beneath all the other wants and wishes and dreams. Simply to belong, simply to be loved, simply to have a place that was theirs. The wanderer carefully returned the bottle to its place on the shelf and wiped the tears away with the back of one hand, smiling despite the emotion, or perhaps because of it, feeling somehow lighter, somehow more connected to all the other dreamers who had ever looked up at the stars and made wishes, who had hoped for things simple and profound, who had reached beyond themselves towards something they sensed but could not name. The archivist stood nearby, their expression understanding, compassionate. "The dreams stored here," they said gently, "are often the most powerful because they represent our deepest longings, the things we want so much we cannot speak them aloud in daylight, the things we can only whisper to the stars when we think no one else is listening. But the stars listen, the universe listens, and the library preserves these dreams, honors them, keeps them safe. Together they walked along the spiraling shelves, ascending gradually, moving among the bottles like visitors in a gallery, pausing here and there when a particular light caught the eye or called to the heart. The archivist would occasionally point out bottles of particular significance or beauty, sharing stories about the dreamers who had made the wishes contained within. "This one," the archivist said, indicating a tall bottle that glowed with cool blue light, "comes from a child who wished upon the first star she ever noticed, wished for her grandmother who was sick to recover and live long enough to see her grow up. The grandmother did recover, lived another 20 years, and the child grew up to become a doctor, helping others the way she had wished someone could help her grandmother. And here, a small bottle holding light the color of spring leaves. This was wished by a young man who longed to find courage, to be brave enough to leave his small town and see the world. The wish was granted, though not in the way he expected, not as a sudden transformation but as a gradual strengthening, a slow building of confidence that allowed him eventually to take that first step, and then the next, and then the next, until he had traveled to places he had only imagined. The wanderer listened to these stories, feeling the weight and beauty of them, the way each wish was a small universe unto itself, a complete narrative of longing and fulfillment, hope and outcome. Some wishes had been granted, others not, but all had been important, all had mattered to the person who made them, and that was what the library honored. Not the success or failure of the wish, but the fact that it had been made, that someone had looked up at the vast cosmos and dared to hope for something better, something more. They continued climbing, following the spiral of shelves upward, and the wanderer noticed that the bottles changed character as they ascended. Lower down, the bottles had held warm, earthly colors, golds and roses and ambers. But higher up, the lights became cooler, more ethereal, silver and violet, pale blue and white tinged with green, colors that seemed less connected to earthly experience and more aligned with pure spirit, pure aspiration. "The higher we go," the archivist explained, "the more abstract the dreams become. Down below are wishes for concrete things, love, health, success, home. Up here are wishes for things less tangible, wisdom, peace, understanding, enlightenment, connection with the divine or the eternal. Both are equally valid, equally beautiful, but they occupy different levels of the chamber, just as in our consciousness, different desires occupy different depths." Eventually they reached a landing, a wider space where the spiral opened out, and here there were a few comfortable chairs arranged around a small table, a resting place for those who climbed this high. The archivist gestured for the wanderer to sit, and they both settled into the chairs, which were upholstered in soft fabric the color of twilight. From this height, the view down into the chamber was magnificent. The bottles stretching below in their spiral pattern created a river of light, a cascade of stars contained and catalogued, each one marking a moment when someone had reached beyond their ordinary existence towards something transcendent, something more. The archivist was quiet for a time, and the wanderer was content to sit in silence, to rest and observe, to let the beauty of this place settle into bones and breath. Above them, somewhere in the darkness beyond sight, the spiral continued, more shelves, more bottles, more dreams reaching ever upward, ever outward. Finally, the archivist spoke, their voice soft and contemplative. "I sometimes wonder," they said, "what happens to wishes after they are made? Do they simply dissipate into the universe, energy released and dispersed? Or do they have some kind of existence, some form that persists? Here in the library, we believe they persist, that every wish matters, that every hope contributes something to the great web of consciousness that connects all living things. These bottles are proof, or at least they are symbols of that belief, that your dreams matter, that your wishes have weight and substance, that when you look up at the stars and dare to hope, you are participating in something ancient and ongoing, something that has been happening since the first humans looked up and wondered, since the first consciousness recognized that there was something beyond the immediate, something worth reaching for." The wanderer absorbed these words, feeling their truth resonate in the chest, in the quiet space behind the heart where the deepest knowings live. It was comforting, profoundly so, to think that wishes mattered, that dreams had substance, that hope was not foolish but fundamental, a basic human capacity that deserved to be honored and preserved. They sat together in companionable silence, surrounded by captured starlight, surrounded by the hopes and dreams of countless souls who had looked up and wished, who had allowed themselves to want something more, something better, something beautiful. The bottles pulsed with their gentle light, breathing in that slow rhythm that the wanderer had noticed throughout the library, the rhythm that seemed to be the heartbeat of the place itself, steady and sure and infinitely patient. After a time, the archivist rose, and the wanderer followed, and together they began to descend the spiral, moving back down through the levels of wishes, from the abstract to the concrete, from the ethereal to the earthly, until they reached the floor of the chamber once more and moved toward another passage, another doorway, another section of this infinite library where new wonders waited, where new forms of peace and beauty and gentle understanding could be found. As they left the chamber of starlight bottles behind, the wanderer glanced back one more time, seeing the spiral of light rising into darkness, a visual representation of hope itself, climbing ever upward, reaching ever outward, persistent and beautiful and absolutely essential to what it meant to be human, to be alive, to be a dreamer in a universe vast enough to hold all dreams, all wishes, all the bright aspirations of every heart that had ever beaten beneath the stars. The soft archives of restful memories. The passage they entered was different again, and the wanderer was beginning to understand that the library never repeated itself, that every corridor and chamber had its own character, its own particular atmosphere and beauty. This passage was lined with fabric, soft tapestries or curtains, it was hard to say which, in colors that reminded the wanderer of sunset, deep orange fading to pink, rose blending into lavender, purple dissolving into the blue of evening. The fabric absorbed sound, muffling their footsteps until the wanderer and the archivist seemed to be moving through a space wrapped in silence, cushioned against any harsh noise or sudden disturbance. The light here came from sources the wanderer could not quite identify, a warm glow that seemed to emanate from the fabric itself, or perhaps from the air between the folds and drapes, creating a rosy dimness that was easy on the eyes, restful, like the light that filters through closed eyelids when lying in the sun. "We are approaching one of my favorite sections," the archivist said quietly, their voice barely above a whisper, matching the hushed quality of this wrapped passage. "The soft archives of restful memories. These are not dreams, exactly, though they are dream-adjacent. They are the memories that people return to when they need comfort, the recollections that soothe and sustain, that provide rest for weary minds and hearts." The wanderer felt a gentle curiosity about what this might mean, what form such memories might take in this place where everything was given physical form, where the intangible became tangible, where inner experience was honored with outer representation. The passage opened into a room, though calling it a room seemed inadequate for the space that revealed itself. It was more like a series of connected alcoves, each one flowing into the next without clear boundaries, creating an environment that felt both intimate and expansive, both enclosed and open. The walls, the ceiling, even the floor, were covered in soft materials, thick carpets and padded cushions, draped fabrics and quilted hangings, creating a space that felt like being inside a cloud, or wrapped in the gentlest embrace imaginable. Throughout this soft space, arranged with careful thought and obvious love, were what the wanderer could only think of as nests, circular arrangements of cushions and blankets, each one creating a small sanctuary, a private bower where a person could curl up and feel completely safe, completely held. Some nests were large enough for several people, while others were sized for one person alone, but all shared the same quality of profound comfort, of being designed with the sole purpose of providing rest, of offering a space where the body and mind could finally, fully relax. And in each nest, floating just above the center, was an orb of soft light, each one glowing with a different warm color, amber, honey, rose, peach, coral, all the gentle shades of comfort and warmth. The orbs pulsed slowly, rhythmically, and the wanderer realized after a moment of watching that each one was pulsing at the rate of a resting heartbeat, that slow, steady rhythm that the body finds in deep relaxation, in the moments before sleep, in the state of absolute peace. Each nest, the archivist explained, moving among them with obvious affection, occasionally reaching out to adjust a cushion or smooth a blanket, is associated with a particular type of restful memory. This one here, they indicated a nest lined with fabric in shades of blue and green, holds memories of water, swimming in summer lakes, floating in warm oceans, the sound of rain on windows, the feeling of a cool shower on a hot day. Those who rest here often dream of water, find themselves carried by gentle currents into peaceful sleep. They move to another nest, this one surrounded by fabrics in earth tones, browns and greens, and the deep gold of autumn leaves. This one contains memories of forests and gardens, of walking through woods where light filters down through leaves, of lying in grass watching clouds drift across summer skies, of the smell of earth after rain, of all the ways nature provides rest and restoration. The wanderer listened, enchanted, and began to move among the nests, looking into each one, feeling the particular energy or atmosphere that each contained. Here was a nest filled with memories of music, lullabies and soft songs, melodies that soothed and calmed. There was a nest that held memories of touch, being held, being comforted, gentle hands offering care and love. Another contained memories of safety, small enclosed spaces, hiding places that were chosen rather than imposed, the feeling of being protected from storms both literal and metaphorical. "May I?" the wanderer asked, gesturing toward one nest that felt particularly inviting, a circular arrangement of cushions in soft grays and silvers, lined with what looked like velvet or perhaps the softest wool imaginable. "Of course," the archivist replied warmly. "That is what they are here for. Choose any nest that calls to you, settle in, and let the memories it holds wash over you. You need not sleep, though you may if you wish. Simply resting here, simply allowing yourself to be held and comforted, that is enough." The wanderer approached the nest, feeling a growing sense of anticipation mixed with deep weariness, as though the journey through the library had been using energy they hadn't realized they were expending, and now, with rest offered so openly, so generously, the tiredness made itself known. Carefully, the wanderer stepped into the nest and settled down among the cushions, which adjusted themselves immediately, providing perfect support, cradling the body in exactly the right way. The orb of light floating above pulsed its slow amber glow, and the wanderer found their breathing automatically adjusting to match its rhythm, found their heartbeat slowing, found every muscle beginning to release tension that had been held for so long it had become invisible, like weight that one stops noticing until it is finally set down. As the wanderer settled more deeply into the nest, impressions began to form, not quite visions, not quite memories, but something in between. The feeling of being a child again, small and safe, carried in strong arms, rocked gently while a voice hummed a wordless tune. The memory of winter evenings spent by a fire, wrapped in blankets, a book in hand and hot chocolate cooling nearby, the world outside dark and cold, but inside all warmth and golden light. The sensation of waking on a weekend morning with no obligations, no demands, only the luxury of staying in bed as long as desired, drifting between sleep and waking in that perfect state of comfort and ease. These were not the wanderer's specific memories, yet they felt familiar, felt true, felt like they belonged to some universal human experience of comfort and care. They washed over the wanderer in gentle waves, each one adding to the growing sense of profound rest, of deep safety, of being held by something much larger than oneself, something ancient and loving and infinitely patient. The archivist stood at the edge of the nest, their presence a quiet reassurance, and after a time they spoke, their voice barely audible, like a whisper carried on a soft breeze. "These memories," they said, "are not from any one person but from the collective. They are the distillation of every moment of comfort ever experienced, every instant of feeling safe and cared for, pooled together and made available to anyone who needs them. The library knows that sometimes our own memories are not enough, that sometimes we need to borrow from the great reservoir of human experience, to remember on a deeper level than personal history what it feels like to be at peace." The wanderer understood, or rather, the wanderer's body understood, some part deeper than thought recognizing the truth of these words and responding with even greater relaxation, even more complete surrender to the comfort being offered. Time passed, how much was impossible to say. The wanderer drifted in and out of awareness, sometimes conscious of the nest and the library and the archivist's gentle presence, sometimes lost in the wash of restful memories, sometimes hovering in that space between waking and sleeping where both states are true simultaneously, where consciousness becomes fluid and boundaries dissolve. Eventually, gently, the wanderer became more fully aware, surfacing like a swimmer coming up from deep water, not gasping or sudden but smooth and natural, rising into wakefulness as gradually as night becomes day. The archivist was still there, seated now in a nearby chair that the wanderer had not noticed before, their hands folded peacefully, their expression serene and patient. "Better?" the archivist asked softly when they saw the wanderer's eyes open fully. "Yes," the wanderer replied, and was surprised by how true it was, how much lighter they felt, how much more rested despite not having truly slept. "Much better. Thank you. There are many such nests throughout this section," the archivist said, gesturing around at the numerous alcoves visible from where they sat. Visitors sometimes spend hours here, moving from nest to nest, sampling different flavors of comfort, different textures of rest. Or they find one that resonates particularly strongly and stay there, letting themselves sink deep into the memories it holds, finding exactly what they need in that moment. The wanderer could imagine doing exactly that, could imagine spending days here, exploring each nest, letting each set of memories work its particular magic. But there was also the awareness that the night, however timeless it felt, would eventually end, that the library would not be available forever, and there was still more to see, still more to experience before the time came to leave. "I would like to see more," the wanderer said, beginning to rise from the nest, moving slowly, carefully, savoring the last moments of that deep comfort. "Though I know I could stay here happily for a very long time." "The library will be here," the archivist assured them, "whenever you need to return. Once someone has found their way here, the way back becomes easier. The door will appear when you need it, when your heart is quiet and the stars align themselves just so. You will be able to return to the soft archives, to the gallery of floating books, to any place here that brought you comfort or peace." This promise settled into the wanderer's heart like a seed into soil, and they felt immensely grateful, not just for the experiences of this night, but for the knowledge that they were not isolated experiences, not moments that would be lost forever upon waking, but accessible again, part of a place that existed outside of ordinary time, waiting patiently to offer its gifts again and again. The wanderer stood, stretching gently, feeling the pleasant looseness of truly relaxed muscles, the clarity of a mind given permission to rest. The archivist rose as well, their robes settling around them with a soft whisper, and together they moved toward another passage, another doorway opening onto another section of this infinite library. The nests remained behind them, glowing softly in the dimness, their orbs pulsing with that steady heartbeat rhythm, waiting for the next weary soul who would find their way here, who would need the comfort they offered, who would sink into their softness and remember, on a level deeper than words, what it felt like to be truly, completely at peace. As they walked, the wanderer glanced back one more time, seeing the warm lights glowing in the dimness, and felt a wave of affection for this place, for the care with which it had been created, for the obvious love that had gone into designing every detail, every element, all of it intended to serve one purpose: to honor dreams, to preserve memories, to provide rest for souls who had forgotten what rest felt like, who needed to be reminded that peace was possible, that comfort was real, that somewhere in the universe there was a place that existed only to hold them safely and let them rest. The room where stories heal the heart. The passage they walked through now was different in character from those that had come before. The walls were lined with wood again, but this wood was warm and golden, like honey or amber, and it seemed to glow from within with its own gentle light. The grain of the wood created patterns that were soothing to follow with the eye, swirls and curves and flowing lines that suggested water or wind, organic movement frozen into solid form. Set into the walls at intervals were small windows, and through each window could be seen a different scene. Though whether these were views into other rooms or windows onto other worlds, or simply artistic representations was impossible to say. One window showed a garden at dawn, mist rising from flowers heavy with dew. Another revealed a quiet street in some old city, cobblestones gleaming after rain. Through a third could be seen a mountain meadow, wildflowers swaying in a breeze that could almost be felt through the glass. The wanderer walked slowly, pausing at each window to observe, to let the peaceful scene settle into awareness, and the archivist walked beside them with patient grace, allowing the wanderer all the time needed to experience each small vista, each gentle moment of beauty. "These windows," the archivist explained softly, "show places where people have found peace in their waking lives. Every location where someone stood and felt their troubles lift, where someone paused and found unexpected calm. Those moments are recorded here, preserved so that others might glimpse them and perhaps feel some echo of that same peace, that same quiet grace." The wanderer understood and felt grateful for it, grateful that moments of peace did not simply vanish but left some trace, some record, some possibility of being shared across time and space with others who needed them. Eventually the passage opened into a room, and the wanderer stepped through the doorway into a space that immediately felt different from all the others they had visited. This room was smaller, more intimate, with walls lined floor to ceiling with books as in other parts of the library, but here the books seemed older somehow, their bindings worn soft with handling, their spines faded to gentle colors, muted greens and blues, pale browns and grays, the colors of things that have been loved for a long time. In the center of the room stood a large, comfortable chair, upholstered in fabric the color of old roses, with a small table beside it holding a lamp that cast a warm pool of light. The chair faced a fireplace where flames moved slowly, their light casting dancing shadows across the walls and ceiling, creating patterns that were hypnotic to watch, endlessly varied yet somehow repetitive, like waves on a shore or clouds moving across the sky. This, the archivist said, their voice holding a particular tenderness, is the room where stories heal the heart. These books contain what I think of as healing tales, stories that people have found comfort in during difficult times, narratives that have helped mend what was broken, that have provided hope when hope seemed lost, that have reminded readers that even darkness passes, that morning always comes, that the human spirit is resilient and beautiful and capable of enduring far more than it believes possible. The wanderer moved into the room, drawn to the chair, to the warmth of the fire, to the gentle promise of stories that might soothe whatever small aches and sorrows still lingered despite all the peace this night had already provided. The archivist followed, moving to the shelves and beginning to run their fingers along the spines, clearly searching for something specific. Each person who comes here, the archivist continued, still searching, needs a different story, a different kind of healing. The library helps me know which book to offer, which tale will speak most directly to the heart of the visitor. Ah, here we are. They drew a book from the shelf, a slim volume bound in soft blue cloth, its title written in silver thread that caught the firelight. The archivist brought the book to the wanderer and held it out with both hands, the gesture formal and reverent, as though offering not just a book, but a gift of great value. This story, the archivist said softly, is about a lighthouse keeper who tended a light on a lonely shore for 40 years, and about the way that small acts of constancy and care can ripple outward in ways we never see or know, affecting lives we'll never meet, making differences we can never measure. It is a quiet story, a gentle story, but I think it might speak to something in you that needs to hear it. The wanderer took the book carefully, feeling its weight, its warmth, and settled into the chair, which adjusted itself immediately to provide perfect comfort. The lamp's light was exactly right for reading, warm and steady, and the fire crackled softly in its hearth, adding to the atmosphere of peace and safety. Opening the book, the wanderer began to read, and from the very first sentence felt drawn into the story, felt the world of the library fade into soft background as the world of the tale came alive. The prose was simple and beautiful, unadorned but deeply moving, and it told of a person who chose to live apart from the rushing world, who found meaning in tending a light that guided ships safely through dangerous waters, who found purpose in constancy, in showing up day after day, year after year, keeping the light burning through storms and calm alike. The wanderer read slowly, letting each paragraph settle, feeling the rhythm of the prose match the rhythm of breath and heartbeat, feeling the story work its gentle magic. There was something profoundly soothing about reading of a life lived simply and well, of duties performed faithfully without need for recognition or reward, of finding contentment in repetition, in the daily round of tasks that might seem mundane but were in fact essential, important, quietly heroic. The archivist had settled into another chair nearby, and they sat in companionable silence, the only sounds the soft crackling of the fire, the quiet turning of pages, the peaceful breathing of two beings at rest in a place designed for exactly such rest. As the wanderer read, other elements of the story emerged. The lighthouse keeper had a garden, and much of the narrative concerned the slow cultivation of flowers and vegetables in soil made sandy and difficult by proximity to the sea. There was a cat that kept the keeper company, Orange Tabby, that appeared one day and simply stayed, accepting care and offering companionship in return. There were storms, many storms, and the story told of weathering them, of finding courage not through drama or heroism, but through simple persistence, through the decision to keep going even when going felt hard. The story did not have a dramatic climax or resolution. It simply unfolded like life unfolds, one day following another, seasons turning, the keeper growing older, the light burning steadily, ships passing safely in the night, their crews never knowing the person who made their passage possible, never aware of the quiet soul who stood watch in the lighthouse, who kept the lamp cleaned and filled and burning, who made safety possible through acts so small and constant they became invisible. And yet, the story suggested this was enough. More than enough. The keeper was content, fulfilled even, finding joy in simple things, the garden's growth, the cat's purring presence, the sound of waves, the turning of seasons, the knowledge that the light was burning, that somewhere out in the darkness, someone was being guided safely home. The wanderer read the last page slowly, reluctant to finish, wanting to linger in this quiet story, this gentle world. When the final sentence ended, the wanderer closed the book carefully and sat in silence, eyes closed, letting the story continue to resonate, to work its healing in ways both conscious and unconscious. "How do you feel?" the archivist asked eventually, their voice soft, undemanding. The wanderer considered, trying to find words for the sensation. "Peaceful," they said finally. "And somehow lighter? As though something I was carrying without knowing it has been set down. As though I've been reminded of something I'd forgotten." "And what is that?" the archivist prompted gently. "That simple things matter," the wanderer said slowly, working it out as they spoke. "That consistency matters. That showing up and doing what needs to be done, even when it feels small or insignificant, that this is valuable. That we don't always get to see the results of our actions, but that doesn't mean they don't have results. That tending our small corner of the world with care, that's enough. That's more than enough." The archivist smiled, clearly pleased. "Yes," they said simply. "That is exactly what this story offers. That particular medicine, that specific healing. And you received it well." They rose and moved to the shelves again, and this time they drew down several books, bringing them to place on the small table beside the wanderer's chair. "These are others," the archivist said, "that carry similar messages, though each in their own way. You may read them if you wish, or simply know they are here, available whenever you need them. The library does not judge how much or how little you take from it. Even knowing these stories exist, even glimpsing their titles, sometimes that is enough." The wanderer looked at the books the archivist had selected. One was titled The Baker's Daughter, another 7 Years of Silence, a third The Garden at the Edge of the World. Each title suggested a story quiet and patient, a narrative that would unfold slowly and provide comfort rather than excitement, healing rather than drama. "Thank you," the wanderer said, meaning it deeply, feeling grateful not just for the story read but for all the stories, for the existence of this room and this collection, for the care with which the archivist tended it, selecting just the right tale for each visitor, offering exactly the medicine needed in each moment. They sat together in the firelight for a while longer, neither feeling the need to speak or move, both content to simply be present in this peaceful space, this room designed for healing, for the particular comfort that stories can provide, the way they can reach into the heart and soothe what hurts, can remind us of what we know but sometimes forget, can show us versions of ourselves living with courage and kindness, can model ways of being in the world that are gentle and good and worth emulating. Eventually, gently, the archivist stirred. "There is more to see," they said softly, "though I also sense you are growing tired, that perhaps the night is reaching its deeper phases, when rest becomes not just pleasant but necessary. We can continue, or if you prefer, I can show you to one of the library's sleeping chambers, where you can dream your own dreams in safety and comfort, surrounded by all the other dreams that rest here." The wanderer considered, feeling the pull of sleep, the temptation to surrender to it. But there was also a feeling of not quite being ready, of wanting to see just a little more, to experience a few more of the library's wonders before giving in to the need for rest. "Perhaps a little more," the wanderer said. "If that's all right. I feel I'm on the edge of sleep, but not quite ready to tip over into it yet. Is there something else, something that might ease that transition?" The archivist nodded, understanding immediately. "Yes," they said. "I know exactly where to take you next. Come, let me show you one more beautiful thing, one more gift that the library offers to those who wander through its halls in the deep hours of night." They rose together, the wanderer leaving the book on the chair where it rested, its blue cover gleaming softly in the firelight, and together they moved toward yet another doorway, another passage leading deeper into the library's infinite embrace, carrying them toward whatever gentle revelation awaited in the rooms and corridors ahead, in the spaces designed to ease tired souls toward rest, toward dreams, toward the sweet surrender of consciousness into sleep. The observatory of sleeping stars. The passage they followed now sloped upward, a gentle incline that required no effort to climb, the angle so gradual that the wanderer barely noticed they were ascending until they realized the air had changed, becoming cooler and clearer, carrying with it a quality of height, of openness, as though they were approaching the upper reaches of the library, the places closest to the sky. The walls here were made of dark stone, smooth and cool to the touch, and embedded throughout the stone were what looked like crystals or perhaps fossils, small points of light that glimmered faintly, creating the impression of walking through a passage carved from the night sky itself, through stone that remembered stars. The archivist moved ahead slowly, and the wanderer followed, feeling anticipation building gently, a soft curiosity about what awaited at the top of this gradual climb. The passage curved as it rose, spiraling upward in a way that was dizzying in the most pleasant sense, creating a feeling of leaving ordinary space behind, of ascending into somewhere special, somewhere set apart. Eventually the passage opened out, and the wanderers stepped through into a space that took their breath away. They stood in what could only be called an observatory, though it was unlike any observatory that existed in the waking world. The room was circular and vast, its walls made entirely of glass or crystal, so clear it seemed there were no walls at all, only a boundary where the floor met the sky. And such a sky it was. Above and around in all directions stretched the heavens in their full glory, stars scattered across darkness in such profusion that the darkness itself seemed less like emptiness, and more like a canvas so completely covered with points of light that very little background remained visible. The Milky Way stretched overhead in a river of brilliance, and planets hung like jewels among the smaller stars, their light steady rather than twinkling, their colors visible, red Mars, golden Jupiter, pale Saturn with its rings somehow visible despite the impossible distance. But what made this observatory truly extraordinary was that the stars were not just visible. They were close, impossibly close, as though the observatory existed somehow both on Earth and among the celestial bodies, occupying a space between worlds where the distance between things was negotiable, where reaching out might almost allow one to touch a star's surface, to feel its heat, to cup its light in open palms. The floor of the observatory was made of the same dark, polished stone as the passage had been, but here it reflected the starlight perfectly, creating the illusion of standing in the middle of infinite space, stars above and below, surrounded on all sides by the vast machinery of the cosmos in its slow, eternal dance. In the center of the observatory stood several low couches, arranged in a circle, all upholstered in dark fabric that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Between the couches, small tables held what appeared to be telescopes, though these were not the mechanical instruments of the waking world, but rather something more organic, more alive, their lenses made of what might have been water or crystal or liquid starlight, shimmering and shifting, focusing on whatever the observer most needed to see. "The Observatory of Sleeping Stars," the archivist said softly, gesturing around at the magnificent space. "This is where we keep the dreams of astronomers and stargazers, of those who looked up and wondered, who devoted their lives to understanding the cosmos, who found peace in contemplating the vast scales of time and space that dwarf human concerns, that put troubles into perspective, that remind us we are part of something infinitely larger than ourselves." The wanderer moved slowly into the room, turning in circles to take it all in, to try to comprehend the beauty, the scope, the sheer overwhelming magnificence of being surrounded by the universe itself, of standing in a space where the heavens were not distant but intimate, not cold but welcoming. "But why sleeping stars?" the wanderer asked, the question forming slowly, dreamily. The archivist smiled. "Look more closely," they suggested. "Watch the stars for a moment. Let your eyes adjust, let your awareness settle." The wanderer did as suggested, standing still, breathing slowly, letting vision soften and expand. And gradually they began to see it. The stars were not just shining steadily. They were breathing. Each point of light was pulsing very gently, very slowly, in that same rhythm the wanderer had noticed throughout the library, that same heartbeat pace that spoke of rest, of peace, of the body in deep relaxation. "They're sleeping," the wanderer breathed, understanding flooding in. "The stars are sleeping." "In their way, yes," the archivist agreed. "Or rather, this is the library's representation of them, and here, in this place of dreams and rest, even the stars are allowed to sleep, to rest from their endless burning, their infinite giving of light and heat into the void. It is a gift the library offers, rest for all things, even for beings as vast and powerful as stars." The wanderer felt something shift in their chest, some final barrier to complete peace dissolving. If even stars could rest, if even the great cosmic engines of creation were allowed to pause, to breathe, to sleep, then surely it was all right for one small human to rest as well, to let go of the need to keep going, to permit themselves this deep and total relaxation. The archivist moved to one of the couches and gestured for the wanderer to join them. "Come," they said gently. "Lie down here, look up at the stars, and let their sleeping rhythm carry you toward your own rest. This is one of the most powerful places in the library for easing people towards sleep. The stars themselves will help you, will guide you down into dreams." The wanderer moved to the couch and reclined carefully, finding it even more comfortable than anticipated. The cushions firm enough to support but soft enough to cradle, the fabric cool and smooth against skin. The moment they lay back and looked up, the full impact of the sleeping stars made itself felt. Thousands upon thousands of them, all pulsing in slow, gentle rhythm, all breathing their light into the darkness, all resting while still giving, still shining, still fulfilling their purpose even in sleep. The effect was profoundly hypnotic. The wanderer's eyes began to follow one star and then another, tracing patterns, making connections, and each time focus shifted from one light to another. Breathing deepened, muscles released a little more tension, consciousness loosened its grip on the ordinary world. The archivist's voice came from nearby, soft and low and perfectly calibrated to add to the trance rather than break it. Some people like to count stars as they fall towards sleep, the archivist suggested. Count each breath as a star, or count backwards from 100, letting each number be a point of light. Or simply watch, simply let the rhythm of their sleeping pull you down into your own rest. There is no wrong way to do this. The stars will hold you, will guide you, will keep you safe as you drift. The wanderer tried counting for a while, matching breaths to stars, but soon even that small effort became too much, and they simply lay there, watching, breathing, feeling the boundary between waking and sleeping grow thinner and thinner, like mist burning away under morning sun, until it was hard to say which state they occupied, whether they were awake watching sleeping stars or asleep dreaming of them, or some third state that contained both possibilities at once. Time stretched and became meaningless. The stars continued their slow pulse, their gentle breathing, and the wanderer's breath synchronized with them, became part of the cosmic rhythm, the great tide of existence flowing in and out, expanding and contracting, the universe breathing and the wanderer breathing with it. No separation, no boundary, only the shared rhythm of being, of existing, of resting in the great peaceful moment that was always present beneath the surface of busy life. At some point, though whether minutes or hours had passed was impossible to say, the wanderer became aware that the archivist was speaking again, their voice even softer than before, barely audible, like words spoken in a dream or thoughts arising from the wanderer's own mind. The dreams of astronomers, the archivist was saying, are often about perspective, about understanding one's place in the cosmos. They dream of vast distances and enormous timescales, of light traveling for millions of years to reach an observer's eye, of galaxies spinning and stars being born and dying, of the way that human concerns, while real and important, are also tiny, brief, almost invisible against the scope of cosmic time. And there is comfort in this, strange as it might seem. Comfort in knowing we are small, that our problems are small, that the universe continues in its patient way regardless of our anxieties and fears. The wanderer absorbed these words, feeling their truth, feeling the way perspective shifted when contemplating the stars, the way worries that seemed enormous could be seen differently when measured against the vastness of space and time. It was not that concerns became unimportant, but rather that they became appropriately sized, no longer overwhelming, no longer all-consuming. And the stars themselves, the archivist continued, their voice growing even softer, even more dreamlike, they teach us about constancy, about the value of simply showing up, of shining steadily even when no one is watching, even when the light might travel through emptiness for eons before finding an eye to perceive it. Like the lighthouse keeper in the story, the stars do their work without need for recognition, without expectation of reward. They simply are, and that is enough. The wanderer felt these words connecting to the earlier story, felt the themes weaving together, creating a larger pattern, a tapestry of understanding about what it meant to live well, to be present, to offer light even when the darkness seemed infinite, to trust that showing up mattered even when the results could not be seen. The archivist fell silent, and the wanderer lay in the quiet, watching the stars breathe, feeling their own breathing slow even further, feeling the pull of sleep growing stronger, more insistent, harder to resist. And yet there was no need to resist, no reason to fight it. Sleep was welcome here, sleep was honored, sleep was the whole point of this journey, the destination toward which every step through the library had been leading. The stars continued their gentle pulse, and the wanderer's eyelids grew heavy, began to drift closed, then opened again, then closed halfway, then opened just a slit, and with each cycle the opening grew smaller, the closing lasted longer, until finally the eyes remained closed and the wanderer rested in darkness, but a darkness that was not empty because it was filled with the memory of stars, with the impression of their light still burning on the retinas, still pulsing in that slow, peaceful rhythm. The wanderer hovered in that space between waking and sleeping, aware of lying on the couch, but also aware of floating among stars, of being both in the observatory and scattered across the cosmos, consciousness expanding to fill the available space, becoming as vast as the universe while still remaining the small, tired person who had walked into the library hours ago, seeking something without knowing what it was, finding more than could have been imagined. The archivist's presence was still nearby, a quiet anchor, a gentle guardian watching over the wanderer's rest, ensuring safety, ensuring peace. And knowing they were watched over, knowing they were safe, the wanderer let go of the last threads of waking awareness and drifted down, down, down into sleep, carried by the rhythm of sleeping stars, held in the embrace of the cosmos, surrendering finally and completely to the rest they needed, the rest they deserved, the rest that had been waiting patiently for them to accept it, to let it in, to allow themselves this gift of peace. The archivist's evening ritual. How much time passed in that state of deep rest, the wanderer could not say. It might have been minutes, might have been hours, might have been the entire span of the night compressed into a few heartbeats or expanded into an eternity. Time had no meaning in that place between sleep and waking, in that space where the wanderer floated, held safely by the library's gentle embrace, by the watching presence of the archivist, by the slow breathing of stars overhead. Eventually, gradually, awareness began to return, not as a jarring awakening but as a slow surfacing, like a diver rising from deep water at a pace so gentle the body barely notices the transition, barely registers the shift from one state to another. The wanderer became aware of breathing first, of the slow rise and fall of the chest, of air moving in and out in the easiest, most natural rhythm imaginable. Then came the awareness of the body resting on the couch, of the soft support beneath, of the perfect temperature of the air, neither too warm nor too cool but exactly precisely right. Eyes opened slowly, reluctantly, not wanting to leave the peaceful darkness, but also curious, gently interested in returning to the world, to the library, to whatever came next. The stars were still there, still pulsing their slow rhythm, though now they seemed even more beautiful than before, as though seen through eyes cleansed by rest, refreshed by even that brief period of deep relaxation. The archivist sat in a nearby chair, and the wanderer realized they must have been sitting there the entire time, watching over the wanderer's rest, keeping vigil in that patient, peaceful way they had. As the wanderer stirred, sat up slowly, the archivist smiled. "Welcome back," they said softly. "You rested well. I could see it in the way your breathing deepened, the way your body released its tensions. Even a brief rest here can be profoundly restorative." The wanderer nodded, feeling the truth of it, feeling more refreshed than seemed possible given how little time might have passed. "Thank you," they said, voice still soft with sleep, with the lingering peace of having been held safely in rest. "For watching over me." "It is my privilege," the archivist replied, and the sincerity in their voice was clear, unmistakable. "Watching over those who rest here, ensuring their peace, their safety. This is the heart of my work, the thing I find most fulfilling. There is nothing more satisfying than seeing someone who arrived tense and worried drift into genuine rest, into real peace." They rose from their chair, movements slow and graceful, and gestured toward the passage they had entered through. "Come," they said. "I would like to show you something if you are willing. Part of what I do each evening, before the library closes to visitors and returns to its hidden state. It is a small ritual, but an important one, and I think you might find it meaningful to witness." The wanderer stood, stretching gently, feeling the pleasant looseness of muscles truly relaxed, and followed the archivist from the observatory. As they walked back down the spiraling passage, the wanderer glanced back once more at the sleeping stars, feeling grateful for their gift, their gentle guidance toward rest. The passage took them not back the way they had come, but along a different route, because of course the library would have multiple ways to reach any location, multiple paths through its infinite halls and chambers. This passage was lined with windows, and through each window the wanderer could see different sections of the library, glimpses into rooms they had not visited, spaces they had not explored. One window revealed a hall filled with wind chimes, thousands of them hanging at different heights, moving in breezes that came from no visible source, their combined music creating a symphony of gentle sound. Another window showed a garden growing entirely indoors, plants climbing walls and cascading from ceiling beams, flowers blooming in impossible colors, filling the space with perfume and green life. Through a third window could be seen what looked like a concert hall, empty but filled with instruments that played themselves, creating music that was barely audible through the glass but clearly beautiful, clearly designed to soothe and comfort. So many rooms, the wanderer breathed, stopping at one window to observe more closely. So many different kinds of dreams, different forms of peace. Yes, the archivist agreed, stopping beside them. The library is infinite in its variety because dreams are infinite in their variety. Every human who has ever lived has dreamed differently, has found peace in different places, different experiences. The library honors all of it, makes space for all of it. Nothing is too small or strange to be preserved here, to be given its own place, its own honor. They continued walking, and the passage eventually opened into a space the wanderer had not seen before. It was a workroom of sorts, though calling it simply a workroom felt inadequate. The space was circular and warm, lit by many candles and holders of brass and silver and copper, their flames casting dancing light across walls lined with shelves holding bottles and jars, scrolls and boxes, all the paraphernalia of the archivist's work. In the center of the room stood a large table made of dark wood worn smooth by centuries of use, its surface marked with the stains and scars of long service. On the table sat various items, a large book lying open, its pages covered in flowing script, an inkwell and several pens, a tray holding what looked like sand or fine powder that sparkled faintly in the candlelight, and several small glass bottles, empty and waiting. "This is where I work," the archivist explained, moving to the table and resting one hand affectionately on its surface. "Where I catalog new dreams as they arrive, where I prepare them for storage in the appropriate sections of the library, where I perform the small rituals that keep this place running smoothly, that ensure every dream is honored and preserved as it should be." The wanderer moved closer, curious, and the archivist gestured for them to approach, to observe. "Each evening," the archivist continued, "just before dawn in the outer world, I perform a small ceremony. I gather the dreams that have arrived during the night, and they arrive constantly. You see, every moment someone somewhere is dreaming, and those dreams find their way here, through channels I don't fully understand myself. They simply come, drawn by the library's existence, by its purpose." As they spoke, the archivist moved around the table, lighting incense that had been waiting in small holders, and the room began to fill with a scent that was both familiar and strange, something like sandalwood and something like the sea, like old paper and new grass, a combination that should not have worked but somehow did, creating an atmosphere of focused calm, of ritual space. "The dreams arrive," the archivist continued, their voice taking on a rhythmic quality, as though they were reciting something memorized long ago. "And I greet each one, I acknowledge it, I thank the dreamer for their gift, whether they know they've given a gift or not. Then I record the dream in this book." They gestured to the large tome lying open on the table, writing its essence, its core quality, so that it becomes part of the library's catalog, so that it can be found again if needed. The archivist picked up one of the pens, dipped it in the ink, and made a few marks on the page, demonstrating the process. Their handwriting was beautiful, flowing and elegant, the letters themselves seeming to glow faintly as they appeared on the page. "Then I take a small amount of the dream's essence," they gestured to the sparkling powder on the tray, "and I place it in one of these bottles, sealing it carefully, preparing it to be taken to whichever part of the library it belongs. Some dreams go to the gallery of floating books, others to the moonlit shelves or the chamber of forgotten whispers. Each dream knows where it belongs, and if I listen carefully, it will tell me, will guide me to place it correctly." The wanderer watched, fascinated, as the archivist moved through these motions with practiced grace, with obvious love for the work, for the ritual, for the dreams themselves. There was something deeply moving about seeing the care with which each dream was treated, the reverence with which it was handled, recorded, preserved. "But tonight," the archivist said, pausing in their movements and turning to face the wanderer, "tonight I would like to perform one additional ritual, something I do only occasionally, when the circumstances are right, when a visitor has journeyed deep into the library and is preparing to leave, to return to their own world, to wake from this dream of the library itself." They moved to a shelf and drew down a bottle that was larger than the others the wanderer had seen, made of crystal that caught the candlelight and scattered it into rainbows. The bottle was empty, waiting. "This bottle," the archivist said softly, "is for you. For the dream you will have tonight when you finally leave this place and surrender to true sleep. Your time here in the library will become a dream, a memory, something that feels both real and unreal, both experienced and imagined. And that dream, the dream of wandering through the library, of seeing all these wonders, of finding peace in these halls, that dream I would like to preserve, to keep safe, so that it can exist here alongside all the other dreams, so that some future visitor might encounter it and feel what you have felt tonight. The wanderer felt tears prickling at the corners of their eyes, moved by this offer, by the idea that their experience tonight was valuable enough to be preserved, to be honored in the same way as all the other dreams kept safe in this place. "Would you permit this?" the archivist asked gently. "Would you allow me to preserve your dream of the library, to add it to our collection?" "Yes," the wanderer said without hesitation. "Yes, of course. I would be honored." The archivist smiled, clearly pleased, and placed the crystal bottle carefully on the table. "Then when you leave, when you drift from this place into true sleep, the bottle will capture the essence of your experience here, will preserve it safely. And someday, perhaps many years from now, someone else will find your dream and will experience through it some echo of the peace you have found tonight. That is how the library grows, you see, not just through the dreams people have, but through the dreams they have about the library itself. It is a living thing, constantly growing, constantly adding new rooms and halls and chambers to accommodate all the different ways people find peace, all the different forms their rest can take." The archivist moved to the table and picked up the large book, turning its pages slowly, showing the wanderer some of the entries recorded there. The handwriting varied. Clearly many different people had written in this book over the years, or perhaps the archivist's handwriting changed to match the character of each dream they recorded. The entries were brief but evocative, capturing in just a few words or sentences the essence of each dream. "Flying over autumn forests," one read. "Conversation with a long-dead grandmother," read another. "Walking through a city made of glass," said a third. "Every dream that has ever been dreamed," the archivist said softly, "is recorded here, in this book or in others like it stored throughout the library. It is an infinite catalogue, an endless record of human consciousness in its most unguarded, most creative, most honest state. I am merely the current keeper of this record, the current archivist. There have been others before me, and there will be others after. The work continues, the preservation continues, the honoring continues, because it must, because dreams matter, because the inner life is as real and important as the outer life, because what we experience when we close our eyes and let go is worth preserving, worth protecting, worth celebrating." The wanderer stood in the candlelit workroom, watching the archivist move among their tools and materials, performing the small tasks of their evening ritual, and felt a profound sense of peace settle over them, a deep gratitude for this place, for this guardian who tended it with such obvious love, for the existence of somewhere in the universe where dreams were treated as precious, where the imagination was honored, where rest was not just permitted, but celebrated. The archivist completed their ritual, placing the crystal bottle in a position of honor on the table, ready to receive the wanderer's dream when the time came. Then they turned to the wanderer once more, their expression gentle, their eyes kind. "Come," they said. "There is one more thing I would like to show you before your time here comes to an end. One final gift the library would like to offer. Follow me." And the wanderer, feeling the pull of sleep growing stronger now, feeling the need for true rest becoming harder to resist, followed the archivist from the workroom, down another passage, toward whatever final wonder awaited, whatever last moment of beauty and peace the library had prepared for this night, this journey, this gentle descent into dreams. A final dream chosen for peace. The passage they walked through now was perhaps the most beautiful yet, though the wanderer was beginning to understand that each part of the library revealed itself as the most beautiful in its own way, that beauty here was not a competition but a constant offering, a gift presented again and again in infinite variations, each one perfect for the moment in which it appeared. The walls of this passage were covered in murals painted directly onto the smooth plaster, and the murals depicted scenes of rest and peace from every culture and time period imaginable. Here was a person sleeping under a tree in dappled sunlight, their face serene, their breathing steady. There was a child curled in a parent's lap, safe and warm, eyes closed in complete trust. Further along, an elderly person sat by a window watching rain fall, a blanket across their lap, a cup of tea cooling on the table beside them, their expression one of deep contentment. The scene seemed to glow very faintly, as though lit from within, and as the wanderer walked slowly past them, they felt each image offer its particular gift. The peace of the sleeping person under the tree, the safety of the held child, the contentment of the elder watching rain. These were not just pictures, but somehow transmissions of feeling, emotional states made visible and shareable, offered freely to anyone who took the time to look, to receive. The archivist walked slowly, giving the wanderer time to observe each scene, to let each one sink in and do its work. They moved in companionable silence, and the wanderer felt grateful for this quiet, for the way the archivist knew when to speak and when to simply allow experience to unfold without commentary, without interpretation. Eventually the passage opened into a small chamber, intimate and cozy, with a ceiling so low it felt like being inside a comfortable cave, or perhaps a tent, protected and enclosed in the most soothing way. The walls curved inward slightly, creating a sense of being held, being embraced by the space itself. In the center of the chamber stood a single pedestal made of dark wood, smooth and simple, and on the pedestal rested a book. Just one book, unlike all the other rooms they had visited where books numbered in the hundreds or thousands. This single volume rested alone, waiting, its cover the color of deep twilight, that particular blue-purple that the sky becomes in the moments between day and night, between light and darkness. "This," the archivist said softly, "is the book I wanted to show you. It is called the Book of Perfect Rest, and it contains only one dream, but that dream is perhaps the most important one in the entire library. It is the dream that the library itself dreams, if such a thing makes sense. The dream of what perfect rest would feel like, what absolute peace would be." The wanderer approached the pedestal slowly, feeling the significance of this moment, feeling that something important was being offered, some final gift before the journey ended and sleep finally claimed them completely. "You may read it if you wish," the archivist said, "or I can read it to you if you prefer. Some visitors find it easier to receive the dream through hearing rather than seeing, especially when they are as close to sleep as you are now." The wanderer considered, feeling how heavy their eyelids had become, how difficult it was becoming to focus, to maintain full awareness. "Would you read it to me?" they asked softly. I think I'm very close to sleep now. I don't know if I could focus on the words." "Of course," the archivist replied, and there was such warmth in their voice, such gentle affection, that the wanderer felt tears prickle again at the corners of their eyes. The archivist moved to the pedestal and carefully opened the book, turning pages until they found the place they sought. "Sit," the archivist suggested, gesturing to cushions arranged on the floor around the pedestal. "Or lie down if you prefer. Make yourself as comfortable as possible." The wanderer settled onto the cushions and after a moment's consideration, decided to lie down, curling slightly on their side, head resting on one arm. The position was comfortable, natural, the position the body naturally wanted to assume when preparing for sleep. The archivist sat nearby, the book held carefully in their hands, and they began to read, their voice taking on that same quality it had held throughout the night. Soft and low, rhythmic and soothing, like waves on a shore, like wind through trees, like the sound of existence itself moving through its eternal patterns. "The dream of perfect rest," the archivist read, "begins in a place where all burdens have been set down, where every worry has been released, where the body remembers what it feels like to be completely at ease. There is no pain here, no discomfort, only the perfect support of cushions that know exactly how to hold you, of air that is exactly the right temperature, of light that is exactly as bright or dim as needed." The wanderer felt these words sink into them, felt their body responding, muscles releasing even further, breath deepening even more. "In this dream," the archivist continued, "time has stopped its rushing. There is no schedule to keep, no appointment to remember, no task waiting to be completed. Everything that needs to be done has been done, or can wait, or was never as urgent as it seemed. There is only this moment, this breath, this heartbeat, and the next, stretching out in a long line of peaceful moments, each one sufficient unto itself." The wanderer's eyelids drifted closed, then opened slightly, then closed again, finding it harder and harder to keep them open, finding less and less reason to try. "The dream knows," the archivist read on, their voice growing even softer, even more distant, as though speaking from very far away or from inside the wanderer's own mind, "that rest is not laziness but necessity, not indulgence but essential maintenance. The dream knows that the body needs sleep the way flowers need sun, the way rain needs clouds, the way all living things need rest to continue being alive, to continue growing, to continue offering their gifts to the world." Yes, the wanderer thought, though whether they thought it or simply felt it was unclear. Yes, that's true. Rest is necessary. Rest is good. "In the dream of perfect rest," the archivist continued, "there is no guilt about sleeping, no anxiety about time passing, no fear of what might happen while consciousness is away. There is only trust that the world will continue without constant watching, trust that tomorrow will come in its own time, Trust that for now, for these hours, it is safe to let go, to drift away, to surrender to sleep. The wanderer felt trust blooming in their chest, warm and solid, a feeling of absolute safety, of being held by something infinitely patient and kind. The dream invites, the archivist read, their voice now barely a whisper, barely audible, invites the body to release, to soften, to sink down into the support beneath it, to let gravity do its work, to let weight be given over to the earth or the cushions or whatever holds the sleeping form. The dream invites the mind to slow its thinking, to let thoughts drift like clouds across a summer sky, present but not demanding attention, moving through and away, leaving only the blue emptiness of sky, the vast peace of awareness without thought. The wanderer's breathing had slowed to the pace of deep sleep, chest rising and falling in that slow rhythm that indicated the body had found its resting state, had surrendered to the pull of unconsciousness. The dream promises, the archivist continued, though now their voice seemed to come from very far away, from another world perhaps, barely reaching across the growing distance between the wanderer's awareness and the outer world, promises that this rest is deserved, that this peace is earned, that there is nothing that needs to be proven or accomplished before rest is permitted. Rest is a birthright, a gift given freely to all living things. Rest is waiting, patient and kind, for the moment when the body finally agrees to receive it. The wanderer heard these words from a great distance, felt them more than heard them, felt them settle like snow falling on snow, soft and silent, adding to the accumulation of peace that had been building all night, through all the rooms and passages, through all the stories and stars and gentle comforts offered. And in the dream, the archivist whispered, their voice now indistinguishable from silence, from the wanderer's own heartbeat, from the sound of breath moving in and out. In the dream of perfect rest, there is no ending, only the gentle continuation of being, only the soft persistence of existing in peace, only the eternal present moment of rest, stretching out infinitely in all directions, holding everything safely, letting everything be exactly as it is, without need for change, without desire for anything other than this perfect peace, this complete rest, this absolute safety here now forever. The wanderer heard nothing more, or rather, heard everything at once. The sound of their own breathing, the distant whisper of the library breathing with them, the pulse of sleeping stars, the turning of pages in distant rooms, the settling of dreams into their proper places, all of it combining into a great symphony of silence, of peace, of rest so complete and total that nothing else existed, nothing else mattered, nothing else could intrude upon this perfect moment of surrender, of letting go, of finally allowing sleep to arrive and carry them away into dreams. A gentle farewell and drift into sleep. The wanderer rested in that small chamber, breathing slowly, deeply, their body completely relaxed, their mind drifting through layers of consciousness like a leaf floating down through water, moving without effort, without intention, simply allowing gravity and the natural movement of things to carry them where they needed to go. The archivist sat nearby, the book still open in their hands, though they had stopped reading, stopped speaking, content now to simply maintain their gentle presence, to keep watch while the wanderer moved through these final stages of waking, these last moments before sleep claimed them completely. After a time, the archivist carefully closed the book and set it back on its pedestal, the soft sound of pages coming together barely audible, barely enough to disturb even the lightest sleep. They rose slowly, moving with infinite care, and drew a blanket from somewhere. Perhaps it had been there all along, folded on a nearby shelf, or perhaps the library provided it, anticipating the need, and draped it gently over the wanderer's resting form, tucking it carefully around shoulders and feet, ensuring warmth, ensuring comfort. The wanderer stirred slightly at the touch, made a small sound of contentment, and then settled even deeper into rest, the blanket's weight adding to the sense of being held, being cared for, being safe. The archivist stood for a moment looking down at the wanderer with obvious affection, with a gentleness that suggested they had done this countless times before, had watched over countless visitors as they surrendered to sleep, had kept vigil through countless nights while tired souls found the rest they needed in the library's embrace. "Sleep well," the archivist whispered, so softly the words were more breath than sound, more intention than speech. "Sleep deeply, sleep peacefully, and know that you are safe here, that you are welcomed here, that you are held here. Let all your worries drift away like smoke on a breeze. Let all your tensions release like ice melting in spring sunshine. Let your mind grow quiet and still like a pond on a windless day. You have done enough today, accomplished enough, tried enough. Now is the time for rest, for restoration, for letting sleep do its healing work." The archivist moved slowly around the small chamber, adjusting the light so it dimmed even further, becoming just the faintest glow, barely enough to see by, just enough to keep the darkness from being absolute, to provide that small comfort of knowing one is not in complete blackness but in a soft, protective dimness. They moved to the entrance of the chamber and paused there, looking back one more time at the wanderer, who lay curled peacefully on the cushions, breathing steadily, face relaxed into the smoothness that comes only with true rest, with genuine peace. "The library will remain around you," the archivist said, their voice carrying through the small space with perfect clarity despite its softness. "Even as you sleep, even as you dream, the library continues. The books continue their slow dance through the gallery, the stars continue their gentle breathing in the observatory, the nests in the soft archives wait patiently for the next weary soul who needs their comfort. All of it continues, all of it endures, and all of it will be here if you need to return, when you need to return. The door will appear when the time is right, when your heart is quiet and the night is deep, when the stars align themselves just so." The wanderer heard these words from a great distance, from the far shore of consciousness, heard them as promises being made, as gifts being offered, as reassurance that this peace, this rest, this place would not be lost forever when morning came, when waking became necessary again, when the ordinary world called them back to its demands and responsibilities. "But for now," the archivist continued, "for these hours there is nothing to do but rest, nothing to accomplish but sleep, nothing to achieve but peace. Let your breathing carry you deeper into rest, each exhale releasing a little more tension, each inhale drawing in a little more peace. Let your heartbeat be your lullaby, steady and sure, the rhythm of life continuing without need for conscious attention, without requiring any effort at all." The archivist's voice began to fade, growing fainter and fainter, not because they were speaking more quietly, but because the wanderer was drifting further away, sinking deeper into sleep, into the place where words could no longer reach, where only feeling existed, only the vast peaceful presence of rest, of letting go, of surrendering completely to the body's need for unconsciousness. "Sleep," the archivist whispered, the word barely existing, barely more than silence itself. "Sleep and dream, dream and rest, rest and restore. Let the library hold you while you sleep. Let your dreams join all the other dreams kept safe here. Let yourself be part of this vast collection, this infinite archive of human consciousness at rest. You are not alone. You have never been alone. We are all dreamers together, all of us, and our dreams connect us, unite us, remind us that beneath all our differences, we share this fundamental need for rest, for peace, for the healing that comes only when we allow ourselves to stop, to pause, to surrender to sleep." The wanderer heard only fragments now, single words drifting through the increasing distance. Safe, peaceful, rest, dreams, sleep. Each word fell like a soft stone into still water, creating ripples that spread outward and faded, leaving only stillness, only silence, only the vast quiet peace of deep unconsciousness. The archivist stood at the entrance to the chamber for a long moment, watching, ensuring the wanderer was truly at rest, truly settled into sleep. Then, satisfied, content, they turned and moved silently away, leaving the chamber, leaving the wanderer to their dreams, to their rest, to the deep healing that sleep provides when it is finally, fully allowed to do its work. The library around the sleeping wanderer breathed softly, its vast presence somehow both immense and intimate, both infinite and personal. In distant rooms, books continued their slow movements, floating and drifting, carrying their captured dreams through gentle currents of air. In the observatory, stars pulsed their slow rhythm, breathing light into the darkness. In the chamber of forgotten whispers, the suspended objects swayed almost imperceptibly, their silver light washing over empty space, waiting patient as the stones and hills and ancient mountains wait, knowing that waiting is not wasted time, but simply another form of being, another way of existing. The library knew how to hold a sleeping visitor, how to adjust its atmosphere, its presence, to provide exactly what was needed. The temperature remained perfect, the air remained still, the light remained dim. Time moved differently here, stretching out so that minutes could feel like hours, so that rest could be deep and complete even if the actual time spent sleeping was brief. The library existed outside of ordinary time, and it used that quality now to give the wanderer the gift of deep, restorative sleep, the kind that leaves one feeling renewed, refreshed, ready to face whatever comes next with energy and clarity and peace.